Yes, I'm here and ready. I couldn't hear anything for a second. I thought, uh-oh, it happened again.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. That gavel was just to wake everybody up. We welcome you to the Wednesday, March 25th meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Utah Transit Authority. We would just note a couple special circumstances in conforming our meeting to the current COVID-19 pandemic guidelines given to us by public health officials. We're limiting those that are present in the room. One of our trustees is joining us via phone and video conferencing. Previously, we announced in our agenda that public comments will just be taken electronically through a couple means. And then we'll also limit room occupancy to 10 people, and participants will just come and go as needed. Those who need to can view us live through our YouTube live streaming channel. Let's begin now by invite you to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have the privilege today of doing our Safety First minute, and let's see. Jana, do I need to advance that, or there we go. I would just, the message that our safety team gave us is that complacency is safety's worst enemy. I would just preface it by, in high school, when I had auto shop, the teacher kept telling me we were supposed to wear our safety glasses, and one day I was out in the shop area cleaning out a ball bearing with an air hose and didn't have my safety glasses on. And 2 days later, I found myself in the ER having a little speck of metal removed from my eyeball, and that kind of has stayed with me with every eye exam. The doctors reminded me and said, "What's that mark on your eye?" So sometimes that complacency does catch up with you, but we do consistency. Safety is seldom automatic, and we have to work to it with our highest degree of awareness. And one key to avoid the complacency is to form a safety habit, or just get in the repeated steps of taking and making it part of our behavior. And habits such as wearing gloves, glasses, proper footwear, safety harnesses, on and tied off, a face shield when grinding, removing tripping hazards, attending safety meetings, paying attention and checking switch points, following procedure checklists, and using seat belts, etc., all become habits that ultimately will serve us well. And so let's work in a manner that we do not fall into a complacency trap when it comes to safety. With that, we have our consent agenda, and would just make note that we're going to but just delay approval of item D, which is a COVID-19 pandemic leave program. We'll have some additional discussion on that. And so with that, Kent, we're going to look to you for most of today's motions, if you don't mind. And
that's fine.
If you wouldn't mind making a motion in regards to that consent agenda minus item D.
I move that we approve the consent agenda minus item D, which will be considered later.
Okay.
I second.
I have a motion from Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. That takes us to our agency report, and with our Executive Director, Carolyn Gannott. Good morning, Carolyn. It's been quite the week.
Yeah. Good morning. I just first want to talk a little bit about the earthquake. I'm going to change up the agenda, or actually I'll do the earthquake first. You know, on last Tuesday morning, I think it was Wednesday morning, March 18th, a 5.7 magnitude earthquake hit Salt Lake City, or actually near Magna. The event temporarily cut power to the local services and infrastructure. including Salt Lake City International Airport and some of our services as well. Although UTA Salt Lake City facilities for bus and light rail were operating on emergency generators, bus routes continued normally. We were able to hit almost all of our routes. I think the only time that we really had any delays was when we stopped right after the earthquake occurred. We also coordinated with Salt Lake's Emergency Operations Center, prepare for a potential large-scale evacuation of a community near the epicenter. It was, we were grateful that didn't have to happen, but we were prepared, and it was good to see our team come into action. We did, of course, activate the Emergency Operations Center. Both Chairperson Christensen and myself were there, as well as Eddie and the whole EOC team. I was very proud of how we all worked together. The one thing that was nice to see is that the system itself is fairly resilient. We didn't actually have issues with our system or any damage to our system outside of running on emergency generators in all the facilities in Salt Lake City, and tracks being down because of the power, with loss of power, mostly through Rocky Mountain Power throughout the city and the county. We were able to primarily keep other services running. Front Runner was delayed. We had a lot of aftershocks, and we, for caution's sake, we did not move faster. So anyways, I was just very proud of how we were well coordinated with our local, state, community partners, and our employees continue to go beyond, above and beyond to maintain the service and keep our riders informed. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the COVID-19. As you're aware, the concerns regarding the COVID-19 has escalated quickly over the past 2 weeks. State officials and the governor have held various press conferences. We continue to see closures throughout the state and throughout the region. But UTA is considered an essential public service, with many people depending on us to get them where they need to go. We want to do everything possible to continue providing this critical service while keeping our riders, employees, and the community safe. We have the Emergency Operations Center team partially activated in the sense that they meet every morning and continue to stay on top of things, trying to get supplies for our team and our employees. We want to remain nimble and practical, but we also know things continue to change rapidly, and we're doing the best to, actually, we are continuing to adhere to the CDC recommendations and keep everyone safe while providing service to those who need it. I have 2 things I want to cover today. I'm going to ask 2 of the chiefs to come up. One is we put into place we're trying to encourage as many employees to telecommute, and we put information out last week on the telecommuting. That's why you'll see not a lot of employees there, but it's amazing how many meetings we still have on our calendars as we telecommute and continue to meet on various items and keep things going. So the other area we did was put into place a pandemic leave program, which we wanted to bring to you today, with an understanding that there are things rapidly changing with the actions at the federal level. So I'm going to have Kim talk about that, and then Eddie will come up and talk about what we're doing in terms of keeping our riders safe and how we're monitoring this system in terms of ridership. You sit 6 feet apart. Yeah.
Getting too close, Ed.
Okay, Kim.
Thanks for being compliant.
Of course. Want to do what we can. So we did implement a COVID-19 pandemic leave program that was really created to help stop the spread, slow the spread, and ensure that folks who might be in a compromised position or might be carriers or impacted by the COVID-19 were able to take time off. So we added a supplemental, this program is supplemental and it's very temporary. And as a matter of fact, it will be more temporary than we had intended because we had federal legislation passed last week that will require us to make changes to this. But until April 2nd, we plan to continue following this program, which pretty much just provides additional supplemental pandemic leave to employees who have traveled to hot zones or level 3, level 2 areas that need to self-quarantine, people who have been in contact with somebody with a positive test, and it gives an additional 80 hours of pandemic leave to our operator workforce because they have a different program than other employees.
Point of order. Sorry, Kim, can you talk into the mic? The people on the phone
sure.
are having a hard time hearing.
Sorry about that. So it gives 40 hours of leave to self-quarantine to folks and 80 hours to our operator population, and then those are prorated for part-time employees. It also requires that somebody who travels after the date that this memo was released on personal business to a level 3 or level 2 area as defined by the CDC, that they are required to self-quarantine, and they would use their own already established leaves for that. And then we do allow employees who have sick pay benefit to use that for childcare. That's not a usual way that you can use your sick leave. And again, we did this to try to support our workforce and also our customer and the riders. So like I said, the federal legislation came down last week. We're vetting through all of that. It will be different. It offers a little bit more leave than what we've put on the table. So we should have that ready to go by April 2nd to be compliant with the legislation.
Legislation deals with a paid leave portion, and as well as how they sort of made some changes to FMLA. So that will be some of the reflections. And we're working closely with counsel, the Attorney General's office, and trying to figure out how we implement that. So I think there would be an action on that.
Carolyn, could you say that last part again, please? I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Oh,
Something about the action. That's all I heard.
Okay, no, so two things is that the federal legislation had sort of two parts. One that deals with paid leave within the first 2 weeks, and the next piece is the FMLA. So there's some changes, and we're interpreting that as well with the Attorney General, in-house counsel for us, as well as we're going to, so right now we're looking at an action on the current pandemic leave program we have, and then we'll come back potentially even as early as Friday to talk about any changes we're planning on making by April 2nd.
Would it work if we made a motion to approve the program and then and also subject to any modifications that the federal legislation would then impose on us?
Yeah, that would be useful.
I mean, I think you can just
that's-
adjust it accordingly
That would be
to
great.
bring it in compliance with federal. And if obviously federal is more generous, then we would follow that course. But
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to do it that way so that we can continue with this program and then make the updates that we have to make. Thank you.
let me just ask my colleagues if they have any questions, or
No, I think that's very appropriate.
Beth, any questions?
Carlton, I couldn't hear what you just said. Something, could you repeat what you said?
Yeah, I'm just suggesting that we make a motion to approve the program, and then subject to modifications that may be required when the federal legislation begins.
Thank you. That's helpful. I appreciate that.
I will make a motion then that we approve the COVID-19 pandemic leave program that we have outlined at this point in time, as Ms. Ulibarri has explained it to us, with the understanding that with federal legislation, we may need to make additional modifications to be in compliance with federal requirements.
I will second that.
Okay, so I have a motion and a second, and the motion also allows modifications to the program to comply with federal changes that will come in the near future. Seeing no other discussion, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. So thanks for your work on it, and we'll hope that nobody has to use it, but we certainly want them to take advantage of it if needs be. So
Thank you.
you bet. Carolyn.
The next, I just want Eddie to talk a little bit about what we're doing in terms of operations and what we're continuing to look at. And you want to talk a little bit about ridership as well. Thanks.
I can start with ridership. As you know, well, let me back up a little bit. There's a lot of things we've been doing to keep our customers and our employees safe. A lot of that's been publicized up to this point, but we are cleaning our buses every night. We're using a disinfectant type wipe at all of our facilities. We implemented a yellow line on the bus. You know, a lot of times people will stay up really close to the operator. So in order to have that social distancing, We've moved the line back 6 feet and have posted signs, so we've created that distance. Yesterday, we also implemented a rear door entry, and so we put signs up on the bus having people who are able, obviously, to enter the rear door. Obviously, if you need to use the wheelchair ramp or something like that, then those people can't enter through the front door. But again, just putting things in place to try to keep that distance and keep our people, safe as possible. Obviously, this is with everybody, all the things that Carolyn mentioned with the universities closing, restaurants closing down, everybody teleworking. Our ridership has taken a significant hit. If you give me just a second, I'll pull these numbers up. But the last day that I have ridership for fixed route bus is down about 56.5%. Front runner was down 75%. Light rail was down 58%. Paratransit was down 75%, and UVX was down 71%. So we've seen a significant decrease in ridership. It's something that we're continuing to monitor. We look at what it was pre-decline as well as what it was versus the previous day. Right now, there's no indication that we're going to ridership's going to come back immediately, and so we are looking at some different things that we can do. And Carolyn may want to add some more to that. I don't know. But we're looking at additional things, just monitoring the ridership, making sure that we're doing the right things.
Yeah, I just overall that what's going on across the industry is seeing very low ridership everywhere. We actually are still maintaining about 40% of our bus ridership, which is quite substantial. We were expecting to see lower numbers on front runner, which serves a heavy commute market, and as well as paratransit as people avoid going to and various activities are shut down. So we are seeing really, I would say not great ridership, but I'm happy to see that we're like 56% ridership on the bus service, given the circumstances. But we do have to be practical about this, and therefore we will be presenting more information on the Friday at the other board meeting as we quickly try to look at what do we do and try to right sizing, and that is something the federal government does expect us to do as well. So I think Shul will talk a little bit about the passage of the bill.
I was going to say, I this morning coming in, they had a story about New York City, and I want to say that their ridership was down 75%.
I think the Bay Area, like BART, is down 85% right now.
So the fact that bus is maintaining it says two things. One, how essential it is for a lot of people to get to places and to their work, and maybe even more so than our rail option for that particular population base. But anyway, but two, the fact that we're providing that service for those folks, because it's generally bus is not your first option if you have another option. So thank you, Eddie, to you and your staff for keeping those going.
Great, thank you.
We aren't seeing absenteeism much either as well. Our workforce is showing up and delivering the services needed.
It's been incredible. I've said it before, but without a doubt, our workforce is second to none. You just can't beat it. And so even with all the challenges, with schools being closed, our employees have found a way to come in and continue to provide the service that we're providing. So it's been great to see. It's truly been a team effort.
Yeah. Thank you. Carolyn, anything else?
No, the only other thing I have on mine is UTA happenings, and of course we have canceled all of our public events right now and out there, and they're suspended till further notice. So we'll keep you up to speed on that. Thanks.
I would just, having been in the EOC last week, I just want to compliment the staff. I mean, we learned, I think when it was over with, we learned things that we might improve and add to our facility there, but they all stepped forward in pretty amazing ways and very impressive to witness. So thank you. Thank you, Carolyn. Next up is our government relations and legislative update, and we'll invite in Shul Bishop. Grab your microphone there, Shul, and let us know what in all this, in the early days, the legislature actually concluded their business, I understand, and the federal government maybe made some headway last night.
Yeah, normally after the session ends, it slows down, but it doesn't seem like it's done that right now. So first off, let's do the federal update.
Hold that microphone really
Can you
close,
hear-
really close to you. There you
Okay.
go.
You're gonna really have to disinfect this one. So last night the House and Senate negotiators with the administration came up with, they reached an agreement on a $2 trillion stimulus bill. Included in that is $25 billion for transit. What that means for UTA, I'm not sure. Possibly maybe 20 million, I guess in the past that formula would be. I just received an email from Bennett that talks a little bit more about what's in the Senate bill. I don't know if you want me to review some of those or.
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So it said the funds are apportioned under formula. This is just in the Senate bill, so I don't know what will end up happening. But 5307, 5311, 5337, and 5340, those are the formulas they'll use. The funds are apportioned.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well. Could you say that again, please?
Okay. The funds are portioned under a formula. So there's the four formulas they're using is 5307, 5311, 5337, and 5340. They need to be apportioned no later than 7 days after enactment. It says funds for operating expenses related to response to COVID-19 for costs incurred as of January 20th, 2020. Funds may be used for costs to maintain service and lost revenue, personal protective equipment, and paying administrative leave of operations. Paying administrative leave of operations personnel due to reductions in service. Davis-Bacon is not waived, and it eliminates requirements that transit agencies must match federal funds. So that's what's contained right now in the Senate bill. We'll see. I think the Senate's supposed to vote probably today, the House later this week. So we'll see what happens. As far as the state legislature, we were able to receive appropriations, so we need to make sure just to give a special thanks to our Utah House and Senate leadership and the Executive Appropriations Committee for their trust in us and they've invested in us on a few things. First, the point of the Mountain Transit Study receives $250,000 to finish that study. Let's see, and then also the Point of the Mountain Environmental Analysis received some money for $750,000. That's contingent upon contribution of non-state funds. The Frontrunner Strategic Plan received $1.6 million for that study, and then they also had a significant investment in TTIF funds, which we'll be able to apply for. Additionally, some things that are related to us but are going to different agencies. So the Central Wasatch Commission received $50,000 for a ski bus bypass pilot. And then there's also about $1.5 million for a creation of a rail transportation restricted account within the TTIF for rail crossing upgrades, which we can also work on getting a part of that. As far as other bills, we need to make sure we give Senator Harper a special thanks for SB 150. That bill eliminated the TOD cap, which is huge for us. Additionally, we've talked about this before, it requires a station area plan and including a moderate income housing element in those plans. And it allows the Transportation Commission to give priority to projects that are a part of TOD or TRZ. So if you see Senator Harper, make sure you tell him thanks. Also, just involving in the session, I think we need to give a special thanks to some organizations, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, the Utah League of Cities and Towns, Utah Association of Counties, Utah Association of Special Districts, the Mountain Land Association of Governments. There are multiple chambers of commerce and councils of governments that we're a part of in the Utah Department of Transportation. Also a special thanks to Michelle and Bob and the crew for going through countless physical notes and responding to those emails, and then also to Sam Stamos, also known as our Sam the Intern. So, are there any other questions?
Kid?
Have those bills been signed by the governor? SB 150, for example?
I need to double check. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't, but I don't know if he's actually signed it yet.
I know he
Okay.
has, because I heard him on unrelated things, and this was yesterday, said he had 6 days to review all the remaining bills, so they were working pretty diligently. So we probably by the end of the week, we would know.
Yeah, and as long as he doesn't veto it, we don't really, it'll work.
I wouldn't think if there anything in there that would cause that kind of change.
Yeah.
Beth, did you have any questions of Shul?
No, I didn't have any questions. I think he did a great job for his first session. So I think we should thank Shul for his hard work and just jumping right in there. He did an amazing job.
Thanks.
All right. Well, I guess we'll keep you around, Shul. So
That sounds good.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for your work. And Beth is right. You did a great job. So,
What was that again, Carlton? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Beth, you were right. Shul did a great job.
I love that you said that. Thank you.
It's more common than I'm acknowledging. So we'll go on to our resolutions, and the first item up is a resolution approving the interlocal cooperation agreement for the maintenance of park and ride lots near Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons. Eddie, you came with your mic, and
Bring your own mic.
yeah, bring your own mic.
This is a resolution approving the interlocal cooperation agreement with Salt Lake County, the Utah Department of Transportation, City of Cottonwood Heights, Solitude Mountain Ski Area, Boyne, USA, Brighton Ski Resort, Snowboard Resort, and Alta Ski Lifts Company. This interlocal agreement will ensure the continued maintenance of the park and ride lots located at the mouth of Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons. Just a little background on this agreement. UTA has a long-standing relationship with the listed partners to maintain the park and ride lots at the mouth of Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons. The proposed interlocal agreement will ensure continued maintenance and upkeep of the park and ride lots with emphasis on safety, improved canyon transportation, and aesthetic quality of the area. Park and ride lots are important to UTA and critical to the continued success of ski bus service UTA provides to the Cottonwood Canyons. This is a 2-year agreement with 3 one-year options. Under the terms of this agreement, all identified partners will contribute financially to Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County will be responsible for the majority of the required maintenance identified in Attachment A of the agreement. UTA's financial commitment will be $22,000 per year for a total 5-year amount of $110,000. In addition to the annual payment, UTA will continue to have bus platform maintenance and snow removal responsibility of our platforms. Any questions on this resolution?
I don't see it. I'll just add, because I participate at least on the early side of some of these discussions. First of all, thanks to staff for their work on it, but sort of the short nature of the discussion or the agreement ties to the fact that we're pending UDOT's EIS completion and what other park and ride solutions might be part of that mix, and it may at some point require a more heavy capital contribution to do some improvements needed to those lots, but this keeps the lots in decent repair through the period of the agreement. So anyway, thank you, Eddie, for that work. Seeing no other question, did you have a question, Beth?
Yes, thanks, Carlton. I did have a question about UDOT's EIS. Do we know, and I apologize, I probably heard this before, but I can't remember, when will they be completed with that?
I don't know the answer to that question. I remember it being talked about, but I don't have that written down, and just
It's well over a year.
Yeah.
It's not any time. It's not this year.
right.
Thanks. I had thought it was at least a year, but I wasn't sure. So thank you.
If there are no other questions, I'll turn to a motion on this resolution.
I move that we approve Resolution 2020-03-02, approving the interlocal cooperation agreement for the maintenance of park and ride lots near Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
The next item up is a resolution approving Title VI Service Equity Analysis of April 2020 Change Day. And we have Andrew Gray with us. Welcome, Andrew, and good morning.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. So today I'll be reviewing our Title VI equity analysis for April change day. There was only one change during this period, and it's one of the more simple analyses that I've been able to do. And so as a reminder, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits the discrimination of anybody receiving our services on the basis of their race, color, or national origin. And the FTA, sorry, I came down the stairs really quickly. I thought that last one would be a little bit longer.
No, you're okay.
And so the Federal Transit Administration has outlined several things that we can do in a proactive way to examine our system and ensure that we're not unintentionally creating any kind of discriminatory practices or policies in our system and service delivery. So I consider it an intentional process to prevent unintentional consequences. And so as part of this is whenever we make a major change, we have to conduct a Title VI equity analysis and look at the people that are being impacted to ensure that we're not disproportionately impacting protected populations. And so I thought it might be important with this change to go over what a major change is. And so that's a threshold that any time we exceed that with a change, then we will have to do a public hearing process and a Title VI equity analysis. So this includes the addition of service. This would be a new line, a new bus route, anything like that that's coming online. A reduction of service of 33% or greater in our hours, trips, those kinds of things. An elimination of all service during a time period. So whether it's we're getting rid of morning service or Saturday service, those items, if we're eliminating a route altogether, or if we're changing the alignment of the route 25% or greater. So that could be a 25% addition or reduction or just a change generally. And this change is going to fall under that one where we're, and I'll just pull up a map next, we're changing the alignment substantially. And finally, we'll have any time that a fair change is proposed, we'll have to do a Title VI equity analysis. So specifically, as we're looking at Route 606, you can see, and I apologize if it's kind of small, you can see that the red line is where we used to run our service. It would go to 2 different locations, and now it's going to only go to 1. And this is a specific route in Ogden that's aimed towards...
Just so you know, I can only hear. So can you wait until the train whistle
Yes.
stops?
Okay, I feel like it's in my mouth.
It almost has to be there.
All right, I think it's passed. Is this better, Beth?
Yes, thank you. I could only hear the train whistle, so yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Great. Okay. So as I was saying, this Route 606 is only run twice per day. It's between the Wide Horizons Assisted Living Facility, where people with intellectual disabilities are housed, and then it goes through the on the route shown in red, and it goes to 2 different Enable Utah locations presently. And so Enable Utah is building a new facility, and so UTA is going to, instead of servicing empty facilities, we're going to adjust our route to service the new one. And so failure to adjust this would obviously defeat the entire purpose of this route. In the equity analysis, we did consider ridership information. We looked at the minority and non-minority demographics from the 2015-2016 onboard survey. We had to use that one because there was no surveys conducted on the most recent survey. It's a very small route. And there was, none of the respondents responded to the income data, but because of the nature of the service, it could be a safe assumption that most, if not all, would fall into the low income category. We held a public hearing at the facility with Enable Utah, and there were no comments because obviously it's an overall a positive change that I'd be very surprised if anyone would oppose. So in conclusion, UTA would have a finding of either a disparate impact on minority populations or a disproportionate burden borne by low-income populations. Did I say that backwards? Disparate impact is on minority populations and disproportionate burden is on low income. And so because of the nature of the change, if there's no negative impacts on those populations, we don't have any findings. So the conclusion was no findings.
Andrew, I thought it was interesting.
Sorry, could you say that again, please? Your last sentence, I could not hear it.
Oh, I just said that there were no findings within the analysis.
Thank you.
Andrew, I thought it was interesting, your historical photo, with the exception of Dr. King, all the rest were white males. And I thought to myself, well, that's a statement about the impact of the overall legislation. That picture would have a much diverse
Be a lot different
background than it is today. So anyway, but it shows the importance of this. So thanks for that history. Any questions on this study? Okay.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I wanted to know when again, it's hard for me to toggle back and forth, so I apologize, I'm delayed a little, but when is the facility going to be completed again?
It's my understanding that we don't have an exact date. We had to make the changes official. And so in April, it will be an official change, but until the facility is done, we'll run on detour. Or if it were to be completed before April, we would run on detour with a new route until April change day when it would become official.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Carolyn.
Just one, on Friday, we're supposed to come with potential changes in terms of trying to adjust the demand of the service with the amount of service we're putting out there. So this, I just want to be clear, this was for April change day. We've sort of halted April change day because we may have a completely different schedule now. Yeah. Andrew and I were on a conference call with the Federal Transit Administration, Region 8, and for that there would not need to be, because it's a temporary service modifications, there would not be required Title VI, but we would still at that time address any issues we thought we would have.
Yeah, we have a fantastic planning department that communicates early and often with me, and I've continually appreciated the considerations that they've had of the populations that we serve and the populations that are protected by Title VI.
Yeah. Good background. Seeing no other questions, I'll turn to my colleague here for a motion on the resolution.
I move that we approve resolution 2020-03-03, the resolution approving Title VI service equity analysis for the April 2020 change day.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. I'll ask for a roll call.
Trustee Holbrook,
Aye.
Trustee Millington,
Aye.
Chair Christensen.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Andrew, for your work on it.
Just a clarification, Andrew, this is up in Mount Ogden.
Yes,
area,
this is in
isn't it?
Ogden.
And they're actually combining those two facilities into the one new one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
and
I understood that right.
yeah, absolutely.
Good clarification. Thank you. That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which is contracts, disbursements, and grants. The first one up is a contract on the Provo Orem BRT property acquisition parcel. We have Paul Drake on our conference video chat, and we'll turn to him for the presentation. Paul?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, very good.
Yes, I can as well. Thanks.
All right, perfect. So we're continuing to finalize the property purchases for the Provo, Orem, and the BRT right of way. Jana, do you have the slides? Okay, just go to the next one, please. Okay, our team has successfully arrived at an agreeable purchase contract for parcel 155. The property is being sold by University Crossing Shopping Center and is located at 304 East University Parkway in Orem. Purchase will include over 35,000 square feet of fee property and nearly 22,700 square feet of temporary construction easement. The total cost of the property is $585,570, including an administrative settlement of $127,570. That amount is covered by the project budget. Slide. This context map shows what is being purchased. That red there is the fee acquisition for the right of way, and then the green is the temporary construction easement. Slide. The staff recommends that the board approve the purchase of the property and authorize the executive director to execute the purchase contract. Do you have any questions?
Paul,
Go ahead. Well, Paul, my question was, if you could explain the $127,000 on the administrative settlement side.
You bet. That was primarily due to signage. There was a big zoning change during the BRT that necessitated us moving a whole bunch of signage, and that affected this particular property. So that was the majority of the cost. The remainder was some parking impacts and some lighting impacts.
Ken?
this is on the north side of University Parkway, as I understand it. Is that correct?
It's on the actually the south side is what I understand.
I thought this was on the, can you go back one slide, Jana?
No, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry. Let's see.
Yeah, isn't that on the side right where the Best Buy and,
Yep, you're correct. Sorry, Ken.
yeah, that's on the north side. So a lot of those signs were, that had to be moved were actually in the property that we now own, and that gave rise to those administrative costs.
That's correct.
Paul described. Okay, thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Beth, any questions on your side?
No, no questions, just a bit of a comment. So just to clarify, this was something that was being mediated and then now has come to an agreement as finalizing some of these last pieces for the BRT down in Utah County, correct?
There are a bunch of these that we're trying to work through, and that's what the tail end of these are, is just the final settlements. In fact, there are a couple that are probably going to go to condemnation.
All right. Any other questions on this one? Did you have a question, Beth?
No, I just heard a train horn.
Oh.
And I was going to ask when people stop, but it already stopped itself. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion on approval of this contract.
I move that we approve the contract for the Provo-Orem BRT property acquisition as has been explained.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you, Paul. And I guess that brings us to item B, which is a property mediation settlement from Front Runner between 600 and 800 North here in Salt Lake City with Salt Lake City Metro LLC.
Yeah, thank you. So this one is also a mediated settlement to a property dispute, a little more complicated than the last. I believe Dave Wilkins is also available to answer questions.
Yeah, he's here and present.
Okay, so he can provide some legal detail if necessary. We also have Tim Merrill and our outside counsel, Rob Hughes, on this. He's from Parsons Bailey. They did an excellent job representing UTA during this dispute. So first we'll go over some context and some history of the dispute, then go over the terms of the settlement. For orientation purposes, the disputed property is located just between 600 and 800 North in Salt Lake City. southeast of the Warm Springs facility and directly adjacent to the Front Runner corridor. And that's bounded by the red box there on the exhibit. In 2002, UTA purchased a significant amount of rail corridor and associated properties from Union Pacific Railroad. There is evidence to indicate that both UTA and the Union Pacific intended to convey the disputed property bundled along with that 2002 purchase. However, because of a technicality, it was never formally conveyed. Slide. In 2007, you'd go forwards, Janet, to the next slide, please. In 2007, UTA installed several utilities under and over the disputed property, including a fiber duct bank, power line, a gas line, and a fence. This, of course, was under the assumption that UTA had controlled the property. Next slide. UTA has stated in its position that both UTA and Union Pacific intended to include the disputed property with the corridor purchase, and that the legal descriptions that were recorded were inaccurate but not caught by either party, resulting in a mutual mistake. If that is the case, UTA should control the property and Union Pacific would not have had the legal right to sell it. Next slide. However, in March 2018, Salt Lake City Metro LLC purchased the property from Union Pacific and demanded that UTA remove its infrastructure. They made similar demands of Rocky Mountain Power and Dominion Energy. UTA staff began researching ownership of the property and the dynamics of the 2002 purchase. In September 2018, Salt Lake City Metro filed a notice of claim, which included trespass, equitable estoppel, inverse condemnation, and severance damages. In July 2019, after failed negotiations, Salt Lake City Metro filed the complaint in the 3rd District Court. Their claims totaled initially over $1.5 million and later rose to over $1.8 million. Next slide. UTA filed counterclaims including deed reformation, quiet title, public way, implied dedication, and trespass. Next slide. While researching our legal position, UTA staff evaluated our options. They were these three: move our infrastructure, purchase the disputed property outright, or dispute the claims in court. Moving our infrastructure would be complicated because the corridor is very tight in that area, so it would be impossible to install those lines without fouling the track. So the work would cost UTA over $1 million and require Front Runner to close for up to 2 months. Plus, any future maintenance would cause similar disruptions to service. So obviously that wasn't a great option. The next, purchasing the disputed property, Salt Lake City Metro offered to sell it to UTA for over $1.5 million or trade for a property of similar value. However, according to our appraisals, that disputed property was not worth more than $200,000. So we couldn't justify the transaction. And then condemning the property would have required UTA to pay some of those damages they were claiming. The last one, disputing the claims in court. Now, that was almost where we ended up, but of course, success in court is always uncertain. And projections for the legal costs were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Next slide. Fortunately for both parties, earlier this month, we were able to mediate a settlement. Under the terms of that settlement, UTA would pay Salt Lake City Metro $585,000 to settle all the claims. UTA would receive fee ownership to the disputed property, which is a little over 18,000 square feet. UTA would provide the legal description of the property and the draft deed, and all of this would be subject to the board approval. Deadline for the payment would be April 10th. Next slide, please. Staff believes this was a fair settlement and a positive resolution to the issue and recommends the approval of the settlement agreement. Do you have any questions?
One question I have for either you or
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
okay, go ahead, Beth.
Paul, I wanted to just understand, at the time that Salt Lake City Metro LLC purchased that property, there was a building on that property, but then they subsequently scraped it. Is that correct?
David, are you aware of that building?
There was a building there. I cannot recall whether Salt Lake City Metro tore down the building or if Union Pacific tore the building down before conveyance of the property. But yeah, there was a building there. There's a foundation there now.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understand that the 580 ultimately settled for didn't include an inflated value, but it seems like that might have been addressed at this point. I just wanted clarification.
Well, I mean, anytime you settle a lawsuit, both parties are going to be a little bit unhappy. The price is probably a lot more than had UTA was able to purchase that lot from Union Pacific. But at the other hand, you weigh an uncertain court outcome and the cost if UTA were to try to move the utilities off onto its own right of way. What ended up getting conveyed to UTA was essentially 10 feet from the center line of the east track. And so that's really not a lot of room. And so there was also safety concerns because the subsequent property owner could have built a building that had a wall 10 feet from the center line of track, which is very close. Given all of that, it seemed like a good way to resolve the case through mediation. UTA gets the property. We don't have to move the utilities, don't have to expend the time to do that. And even if you were to move the utilities and signal lines, they would be under the track and it would be a continual maintenance problem because it's something you'd have to take at least one of the tracks out of service to do any type of work on it.
David, one question I had is, or Paul, there were some utilities there, gas and I think electric or something. Are they on our this new right away? They on the, or is it something they had to settle with the Metro LLC?
Well, there is a gas line underlined to property that the gas company owns that it's abandoned in place essentially. From what I understand, it's electrical power and fiber optic lines to operate the signal system for Front Runner, and those are going to be on the property that is conveyed to UTA as a result of this, as is the fence, and so UTA won't have to move anything.
Okay. But we don't need to worry about any utility stuff.
No.
David, did Rocky Mountain Power have to, were they involved in anything dealing with this lawsuit? Or were they just strictly an interested party?
Salt Lake City Metro has separate claims against Rocky Mountain Power and the gas company Dominion. I don't know, they've changed their names a couple times. Dominion, and those are separate matters that do not involve UTA at this point. And so that's between those parties.
Any other questions on this particular item or this settlement?
Just a question, what have we done to avoid mutual mistakes in the future?
Well, I mean, I think in the future, I've worked with Paul's team. Anytime there's any conveyance of property, it's simply double checking the deeds, which,
Okay.
I mean, I don't know who's responsible for this mistake as it happened almost 20 years ago, but a lot of property was conveyed to UTA at once and a lot of descriptions, and this is kind of what happened as a result of it. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Any other questions? If there are none, I'll turn to.
I make a motion that we approve this contract, the property mediation settlement, the front runner between 600 and 800 North in Salt Lake City.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the property mediation settlement. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thanks, Paul, for joining us. And we'll next turn to Bob Biles for a disbursement in regards to light rail parts inventory.
This is a check for Siemens Mobility Incorporated in the amount of $306,722.48. It's for 29 invoices on 22 purchase orders from January 3rd through February 10th. and the individual invoices range from $768 to $81,936. We do have an agenda item coming soon to go ahead and add Siemens to the approved list. So hopefully this will be the last disbursement you'll see for Siemens come before you.
Yeah, it's a separate item.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any questions for Bob? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve this disbursement to Siemens Mobility as
Second.
described.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you. That'll next come to our pre-procurement, and we have Todd Mills with us, and looks like you get to be joined by somebody.
Yeah, I brought the big guns in, Kyle, so.
Kyle, welcome. Why don't you go through your items? It looks like there's three of them here, Todd.
Yeah, we got three pre-procurements this morning. So first one is procurement to purchase parts to perform an overhaul on the doors for the SD100 light rail vehicles as part of our state of good repair plan. There are 23 SD100 vehicles with 8 doors on each vehicle. The labor for this overhaul will be performed by in-house employees and will take approximately 2 years to complete. The parts will be sent out for bid to multiple vendors, and respondents may bid on one or more multiple parts as they see fit. The order award will be per part number and will be based on the lowest price for those part numbers, and then awarded as long as they can meet the expected delivery dates.
So one of the questions I have here, more out of surprise than anything, I would have thought the parts for a particular door, you would have to get it from the manufacturer, but are there secondary manufacturers that produce these parts?
Yes, there's aftermarket manufacturers.
There are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is nice because it
Sure.
keeps their pricing a little honest, which is always what we're looking for.
So there's an opportunity for at least a competitive bid here.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right.
So that will go out as soon as we can and get going on that award. Any questions on that one?
Any questions, Beth?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear who was just speaking.
Todd just asked if you had any questions on that light rail
thank
vehicle
you.
door part.
I did have a question. I was just curious as the grant application for Community Challenge. I didn't realize that light rail parts could be in that type of a grant, but that's good to know.
Well, I think those are still to come, right? I don't think this is part of a grant.
Yeah, this is not part of a grant.
This is still pre-procurement.
Sorry about that. I'm toggling back and forth, and it's really small to read. So my apologies. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Go ahead, Todd.
Okay. The next one I have is a procurement for the design and additional maintenance bays and canopies of the Meadow Brick business unit. The architect engineering firm selected will assist UTA in developing the schematic design development, bidding, and construction documents, including specifications to retrofit the site to accommodate the additions. The need for additional bays and canopies at this location is essential to the state of good repair for the bus fleet, as well as to accommodate the needs of our expanding fleet. Funding for this project is included in the 2020 budget. This will be procured using an RFP procurement and selection based on technical criteria in addition to price.
Any questions on this item? Okay, I don't see any. Transit planning software.
Yeah, the last one here I have is procurement for more efficient transit planning software for the planning team. Our current tools, such as GIS and Trapeze, are outdated and can take weeks to complete an impact analysis study for route changes. New software platforms exist that can analyze and compare costs of new services, impacts of changes to existing services, benefits, drawbacks of potential service changes, etc., to minutes as opposed to weeks. Funding for the procurement is included in the 2020 budget, and this will also be procured using an RFP procurement.
What's the total potential cost here
Total potential cost,
on this software?
it's around $400,000.
Okay.
And that's over, that's actually a 3-year plan. So it's about $136,000 per year.
I have to say, Remix is, there's not a lot of options. They have a corner on the market right now.
Yeah, so we actually had posted this as a sole source procurement, and we did have one company come back and say that they could provide a similar software, and so we pulled that sole source back, and we'll put it out for bid now, and we'll see what this other company has to offer. But Remix was the original source that we were looking at.
Sounds like a good business to get into.
Yeah.
Will we, if this second company comes forward with some kind of a bid, will we look carefully to make sure that their software actually does what we know that Remix will do?
Yeah, so we put together, complete scope of work and then selection criteria for that proposal so that the bids can be scored according to meeting those criteria and how well they meet that need.
Yeah, I think there's interest in somebody trying to compete against Remix or other firms getting up to speed to do that.
Yeah.
You got to turn your mic on. Sorry.
It's amazing what monopoly profits will do to attract competition. Love it.
Let's see here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. I think that's it as far as questions go, Todd. And so thank you. And Kyle, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next up is grant applications coming forward. And Mary, welcome.
Good morning. So this grant opportunity, it's through the Department of Health and Human Services, through their Community Living Challenge. And for this grant, we teamed with Community Options, and Community Options is a not-for-profit service provider for individuals with disabilities. And the purpose of the grant is to help agencies hire individuals with disabilities. And it's a 3-year grant. You can be selected for 1, 2, or 3 years. The first year they would provide $100,000 in funding to help develop the employment program, to recruit employees and to conduct employee training, as well as training for UTA managers and supervisors. And we would just use it to hire individuals we were going to hire anyway. It would just be more reaching out to individuals with disabilities to fill some of those positions. The second year, it would just be additional funding to help pay for those employees. And even if we didn't get that funding, it would just be employees that we would need anyway. So it would be part of our operations.
Mary, I love the idea. Are there positions where we either have had experience or whether, as we've thought about it, that could easily be integrated to meet the need?
There are some, and this program would help us develop those criteria and figure out where we could best use those people.
Okay, great.
And then if we got it for a 3rd year, that would just help continue the program implementation. So if we do get selected for this, we would have to develop an MOA with Community Options, and so we'd come back to you at that point and describe what we were going to do there.
And at some point, either year 2 or 3 years, somewhere, we would ultimately assume them as employees ongoing, right?
Correct, right. This is for open positions. We wouldn't be creating new positions, so it would be for open positions.
Oh, okay. Great. Any questions from the board? Okay, I see none. Thank you. Good luck with that.
Okay. And I'm going to stay here while Hal comes up for the next one.
Okay, great. Let's see. Next item up is our UTA Headquarters Administration Building.
And I believe Paul was going to join us online as well.
Paul, are you still there?
And Hal hopefully is
I'm still here.
Hal should be on his way down.
Okay.
This is timely.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you arrange for the ongoing aftershocks just to remind us that this building may be coming to the end of its useful life?
So Hal's going to talk about the structural analysis work that we've done, and then Paul's going to talk about some of our options for our admin building And it is on quite a delay, so Hal probably doesn't realize that we're already ready for him.
So just in general, to go back while how it comes down is that we did have we did do an inspection of all the buildings before we let anybody else in, and we were okay here. I mean, it didn't fall down, it didn't crack too badly. So, but we do have the structural analysis for this. But just in general, Mary's team did go out and look at all the buildings and all of our structures as well.
As well as the bridges. Right. I'm texting Hal. Somebody.
If you need to, we can take a short recess.
I'm sorry. Could you have Mary speak up? I'm having a difficult time hearing her.
Oh, I'm sorry, Beth. We're waiting for Hal. I think there's a delay. Oh, here he comes now. But Hal's going to talk about the structural analysis that was done, and then Paul's going to talk about some options for FLHQ.
Okay. So Hal, apparently we may need a new building at some point. And talk close to it.
You have to get real close.
You just leave it on.
Did it go on?
Pull it
Okay.
Pull it close to you.
Okay, good morning. Sorry, Mary went too fast. I was listening upstairs and thought she was going to take a minute more. So I've got a quick presentation on some work we've done looking at the Frontlines building. So as part of our facilities master plan, we have hired Reevely engineers, and we've asked them to start taking a look at some of our buildings. And Reevely's a structural engineering firm, so we've asked them to look at Frontlines. Was our first building because we had it's one of our oldest buildings that UTA owns, and we have a high density of employees, so we thought we'd start here. So we've got a quick presentation to kind of show you the results of the work from Reevely. So there's actually two main buildings on the campus here. There's the East Building and the West Building. And so we are in the East Building, which was built in 1966. And then there's a little small addition on the back of the East Building. And then the West Building was built in 1991. And then they are joined together in the front at the lobby to create one building. So it feels like one, but there's actually two different buildings on the campus here. And the building codes in...
So are we placed in the buildings based on value, whether we value them or not? Or?
No.
I'm teasing.
No, that's not been part of the...
I didn't hear what you said. What did you say?
It's not worth it.
So there are two different buildings on the campus here, and they were built to the codes at the time, but which are different now. They're much require buildings to be much more structurally sound than they were back in the day. So the let's see if Jana, could you do the next one? I'm sorry. There we go. So there's, did we skip one? Let me go back. Okay, so there's the analysis that Reevely did. I think we might have skipped a slide. If you could go back one.
She's just trying to place Beth on the screen.
So they looked at the East.
I'm not needing much help on that today.
So we looked at the East Building and kind of the current state, and then the likelihood of having problems with the building in a major earthquake. Obviously, the building's all weathered. The earthquake we had last week, but this was kind of looking at a major event, so something greater than 7 or greater. And so we looked at kind of likelihood of loss or likelihood of building sustaining structural damage with that. So the East Building didn't perform as well as the West Building. So if you can go to the next slide. So the West Building performed a little bit better. It's if you're in both buildings, and so I work in the west building, and it has a lot of movement to it, and the floors bounce a lot, but it will move more, but it won't break as easily. So we looked at kind of the light performance of the buildings, and so Reevely looked at likelihood of the buildings being able to be usable after an earthquake was one of the big criteria, and time to recover. So then we also had them look at kind of the costs for structural retrofit as well as for replacement. So we looked at replacement costs for both buildings was in the 17 million, and then I've got a number in the bottom for the structural. So if you go to the next slide, I'll give you a little bit more details on some of the structural work that would need to be due to retrofit the buildings. So the building we're in, the east building, it has its basic structural elements. It's got these exterior columns that you can see on the building, and they're kind of capped up front here with facading, but you can see them on the back and on the sides. So the exterior columns, the recommendation was to basically wrap those in concrete, and so would be to pour another casing around the column, as well as you can see it would go all the way down and underneath the footings to kind of increase the size of the footings and tie those columns together, and then as well as tie the roof and the footings underneath together. So so this was kind of the recommendation for the footings underneath, because these columns, you can see we've got one in the boardroom here, they go down underneath into the foundation, but they're not all tied in together. So they're each on an individual pier. And so the structural engineer's recommendation would be to basically cut the floors and pour a ditch of concrete, if you will, to tie all these columns in together. So if there's an earthquake, then the columns wouldn't move separately, so they would all stay intact. So it's just basically increasing the rigidity of the frame of the building is the recommendation. And then they also recommended making some changes to the stairways in the front lobby and those areas to kind of allow them to move a little bit more easily in case of an earthquake. So that's the kind of the report card on the building. And I would say, just to give you some perspective, these are issues that pretty much, everybody that has a building this age has the same issues. So these aren't unique issues to this building or unique to UTA, or it's just, the way things were built. They didn't recognize the need for earthquakes at the time, and we do a lot more now. So so it's an issue that all different businesses are dealing with along the Wasatch Front.
Reevely's usually pretty cautious and conservative, but do you feel like, but they're good at what they do without question. You feel like that price is in the ballpark, or is it a lot more, a lot less?
I think they gave us pretty good pricing, and then we went through it in a lot of detail and put some contingency in the pricing as well, to try to make sure we were accounting for costs as the best we could. And the things that probably we'd need to account for outside of this would be pretty disruptive to do some of this work. So we'd have to move everybody out of the basement downstairs to do the work. So that cost isn't included.
You got a cheer from the IT folks. But.
Yeah, in the numbers. But so, that's one of the advantages we have with Meadowbrook is some of the thinking is we could move folks into Meadowbrook temporarily and some of the space we have there, and then bring them back.
But does this 16 to 17 million just get you a building that is safe and that people can get out of, or is it reusable, with that level of an earthquake?
The intent would be to have a building that would be able to survive an earthquake and be able to be used going forward. Okay. And so the retrofit cost, so I showed you the cost for the new building, and so the retrofit cost to do the casing on the columns and put the extra concrete into the foundation was about $11 million. So that's kind of the numbers, kind of the cost for the new building versus the
Doing a retrofit.
retrofit. And then Paul has some additional numbers and clarifying information. And so the numbers I gave were just kind of rebuilding on site here or versus if we move somewhere else. And so Paul has some additional information on that. And so, as I said, today we just wanted to present information to the board and be able to, I guess, start the discussion about the best way to approach these issues.
Paul, did you have a piece?
I just had a question for Hal, if that's okay. Are you finished? I wasn't sure. I didn't want to interrupt you.
I think Hal's done with his portion, so go ahead, Beth.
Okay, really quick. And you might have already said this, but I apologize. You kind of went in and out in terms of my microphone. So when you say the seismic upgrades at the $10.8 million range, that will only give it seismic, let's see, I guess security. I don't know how to say that. Only increase the seismic in those areas that we redo. But what does that do to the overall building? Because obviously the overall building is still built in 1966 versus the cost of new. And that was kind of my question. And I wasn't sure if you had indicated something like that. So I just wanted a quick clarification if you could.
Yeah, I guess the way I think about that is it's like putting tires on your car. It doesn't necessarily give you a new car, but you have new tires. Makes your car safer. So it doesn't address any of the other issues. You know, if you've got a aging electrical system or aging plumbing system, this is just the cost for the structural improvements to make the building more structurally resistant to earthquakes.
Thanks, I appreciate that. That's what I was asking for.
Paul, do you want to take your portion?
Yeah, sure. If we can go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about some of our efforts that we've been doing in TOD, and you as a board are already aware of a lot of these things. UTA completed the station area plan for that site, along with Salt Lake City RDA and other stakeholders. And part of that station area plan identified a new office building right there at the Salt Lake Central site. So you can see that in blue right there, just off of 300 South. And then because the site was physically constrained, there was also suggested in the plan a garage west of the tracks, essentially where Frontline's headquarters is right now. So that's right there on the plan in gray. Initially, when we did the plan, we contemplated sequencing development going from north to south. So when the board selected this as a site, and the way that the station area plan was conceived, North Temple and all of the properties controlled by UTA and the RDA would be packaged into one development. And we contemplated going north to south and using some of those proceeds to pay for UTA's building when we got to Salt Lake Central. However, because of the circumstances that Hal's group identified in the seismic analysis, the associated cost of retrofitting UTA's existing building, and of course the reminder that we live on an active fault, we may want to accelerate that phase of the plan. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is a conceptual configuration from our consultant. We're not married to this, but this does show the concept of how the building would be configured. There's a mix of uses programmed for the site, and UTA would be housed in that blue building. It would essentially act as a bookend along 300 West to Rio Grande on the other side. And then next slide, please. The parking garage west of the track that I mentioned before would be screened by additional office on 2nd South, and then be connected to Salt Lake Central site by a pedestrian bridge. As you know, Union Pacific trains often block that crossing, and it creates a a barrier to the west side. So we've been trying to find funding for a pedestrian bridge that would connect those two. Doing that all together would find some efficiencies in the cost of that. So the next slide, please. The office building is projected to include a semi-public ground floor, and that's shown in red on this slide. That includes space for Greyhound, Amtrak, UTA customer service, and some service retail. The portion associated with UTA would be 100,000 square feet, and that would be included in an 8 to 12-story office building. The ultimate height of that building is actually subject to a currently proposed code change that would allow for additional height at the TOD. And then based on the numbers that we derived from other office projects, so we've put together our pro forma based on input from our office partners. UTA's portion would cost between $15.7 million and $20 million. For brand new, this is same level of finishes as what has been built at our other TODs. If you go to the next slide, please. Based on the significant cost of retrofitting our existing building, it's likely that it makes more financial sense to contemplate at least moving this phase forward quicker. We've discussed it with the executive team, and they seem to agree with that idea. But we'd like to get the board's input. We contemplate if we wanted to move forward, the next steps would be some space planning, figure out what kind of space UTA really needs and what kind of configuration would be appropriate for our workflow and how to improve our workflow. And then we would reach out to other interested tenants. There are others that have expressed interest in co-locating in the same building as UTA, so we would have to start talking to them fairly quickly, and then we would, if we wanted to move forward with that, we would accelerate this in the description in the RFP when we select a master developer for the site. So anyway, any thoughts from the board?
Well, a couple questions for you, Paul, and I don't know if you can go back to that slide, Jana, that shows maybe the parking garage. Thank you. That's good. A couple questions I have for you there is, does the figure that you're showing include the cost of the parking garage, or are you looking at that somehow being funded differently?
It includes UTA's portion of the parking garage and some money for a park and ride. We're about to lose the stalls that we're leasing across the street to the east of the Salt Lake Central.
Yeah.
So it does include parking for UTA and some public parking. We are in the middle of applying for grant funds to also help pay for the park and ride portion of that garage. As far as the pedestrian bridge goes, that's not really an essential element at this point, but it would be something that we wouldn't want to lose sight of if we could find funding in the future, but it's not required at this stage.
I'm
just designed to accommodate it in the future.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how functional that parking garage is really going to be. I'm thinking just because when I park in the outer portion of the parking lot back when we had employees here, you were about third west and third south and seventh west. Have a little GPS thing, and it started recording these locations on my trips, and I'm like, third south, seventh west. Where's that? And then I realized it's the further south end of that parking lot, and it's a pretty good distance. And I just wonder how functional that is, and is there not a solution to either across the street or something that would be more useful? Question I have, and that's obviously can come as we do space planning or looking at other solutions, and that is you said something about master developer, and we wouldn't turn to a master developer to develop our own building, would we?
If we wanted to incorporate some spec space, some other multi-tenants, I think that we would have a master developer, because UTA probably would not want to take on the full risk of a 12-story building when we're only going to occupy 3 or 4 floors.
But does that mean then we're subject to leasing it?
Not necessarily. We could condominiumize it and own our portion outright.
Okay.
Plus, Paul, does it?
But any of those could be an option. It really depends on what is the best ultimately for UTA.
Paul, also it depends on the structure that we have in, whether it's a joint venture or something like that as well, right?
Correct. Yep. Right now, we haven't gone into those details, but all of those are an option. We have always contemplated owning outright our portion of the building, and then having some kind of lease revenue as a partnership coming from the remainder of the building.
And where my thought process is, not that being part of a condo association isn't a loving, embracing kind of an experience, but you do lose a lot of flexibility in how you sort of manage your destiny, even if you own a majority of the shares in it, especially when it comes to long-term maintenance and those kinds of things. And so, and developers, as good-hearted as they are, they have to have certain return profits, and so that gets somehow built into your cost. And while we want to develop all our sites, it just seems like having ownership to our building. And right now, most of our bond financing have been taxable bonds anyway. That market's been very competitive in that arena. So you could do commercial stuff in our own building and not have to have tax exempt bonds. I just wouldn't dismiss we may hire somebody to manage the project on the construction side and make sure it's there, but I'm not sure that we gain a ton by having a developer build our own building.
And those are fair comments. I don't think that we've determined the exact structure of what we would do.
And I guess as we got into the spacing piece, I actually think Second South has a lot of potential to it from a development standpoint, and you eat up a lot in that parking structure, and maybe there's still a lot left because of that site. That's why I say I don't know if you put all your parking in that one structure, and I think as we do space planning, it's clearly something we ought to look at. But I'm open to finding some solutions. I'm just wondering a little bit about the current plan.
Sure. If I could address, Carlton, your comments about the distance to the parking.
Sure.
So this is one solution to the parking, and I think we will need to have some on the west side of the track. We have talked to the RDA in the past, and there may be a possibility. There's no commitment, of course, right now, but we've talked to them about a shared structure east of 6th West. Also, there would be some other opportunities for parking on the Salt Lake Central site. You can see even on this slide under Building 2, there's some podium parking. There might be some opportunity for shared parking there. The other thing to keep in mind is that folks that ride transit today take that same distance when they get off tracks or front runner or a bus to get to access our building. So it's no different. It's no different distance for people who drive than it is currently for people who use transit. In fact, this location would give preference to those who take transit to the UTA building.
Sure. Let me go to Cantor.
How long? What's the time frame to build a 12-story building and develop that kind of plan that you've proposed here?
If we've been talking about a 3-year time frame. 18 months to put together design drawings, construction, get permitting and all of that, and then 18 months of actual construction.
Thank you.
Beth, did you have some questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's kind of a commenty question, but I do like the discussion points. I think that there's, at this stage, it looks like there's potential to really kind of massage some of the elements, including, the access points across the tracks, as well as what the structures of those buildings are. And when we're having these discussions with the Salt Lake City RDA, what is their timeline? What are their discussion points? What are their needs? Are we coordinating all of that to a bigger extent than we would normally, simply because it does impact us potentially for our headquarters?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in lockstep actually with the RDA. They are looking to go out for an RFP on at least on these properties together with us. They've also pulled back their properties for Station Center, which is east of 6th West. There will be some coordination there. We've talked to them about implementing a TRZ, a Transportation Reinvestment Zone, on this site. Right now, there's no increment being captured on UTA properties, but we would like to do that to help fund this. So yeah, all the way along, we intend to include the city and the RDA in all of our discussions and work hand in hand really with RDA. North of 200 South, the RDA has properties that they control and they want to incorporate into this overall plan and development. So it'll be a joint RFP likely. Anyway, so yes, our relationship with them is not only going on, but I think it's critical to the success of the project.
I do too. I did have another question in regards to, I know some of the discussion points would lead towards us completing our bus depot, and then looking at where we currently house our buses at kitty corner across the street, and how that would all be impactful as well. Does a lot of this premise on the fact that we have to complete our bus depot first, or how impacted at all?
Not necessarily for this building. Again, initially we were sequencing the development north to south, and that took into account that the bus depot property north of 2nd South would only come available when we finished the new bus facility. However, moving forward on some of these elements on Salt Lake Central isn't reliant on that north property being available. Yeah, we would just sequence it slightly differently than initially anticipated.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I didn't have any further questions at this time, but I'm really excited to see how this proceeds forward. I think this is great.
Thank you.
Paul, you didn't, and I didn't expect you to, but or maybe Hal knows, how does the bus operations continue in this scenario, and does it continue under a construction scenario?
You bet. The station area plan contemplates actually not changing the bus operations significantly. They would still continue to operate the way that they are. However, I'd like to caveat that is that, again, we're not married to every detail of the station or the concept. We would still continue to work with our service planners and operations planners to make sure that whatever final configuration that we come up with is optimal for our operations. So you can see on this slide, it's that top right corner. All that gray area on the Salt Lake Central site is essentially the same layout as the existing bus loop. But that could change slightly if we could find additional efficiencies for our operations.
Hal, did you have anything to add to that, or?
I would just say there's some potential with the site planning that we could maybe improve the bus circulation through the site. So I think there's some opportunities to make things better with this, with the planning efforts that are underway.
At this point, I assume this is just information. Are you looking for something today?
No, we just wanted to give you an update on the building. I think, Paul, do you want to say what your next steps are in terms of working with the RDA and where we might be going?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're continuing to talk to the RDA about putting together that TRZ for the site. We are preparing an RFP that we're shooting for May or June. I don't know if we'll keep that time frame, but that's our current target. We would, if we do want to move forward and accelerate this, we would do space planning, probably hire a consultant to come and talk to the different departments at UTA, figure out what our needs are. Again, what it would be the optimal layout to increase our efficiency as an organization, and then again talk to those other interested tenants, see if they're still interested in potentially co-locating with us, how much space they would want, and what kind of configuration that they would want. And then we go out for RFP May, June, and then start in design and permitting. Again, to your comment, Carlton, some of that depends on how we want to structure, how we want to tackle design and construction of this particular building. We want to make sure the developer to do that in conjunction with us, or if there's some other thing that makes sense.
Yeah. If I could mention just one more point on the 100,000 square feet that we've included there, the planning level number, that's about 20% more than what we're in right now. So we wanted to have some room for growth as we're planning for a facility. But, and I think as Paul is touching on, potentially we can get more efficient with that. So I think we'll know more on the square footage, but kind of talking to other agencies, generally they plan for about 20% growth when they build new buildings to be able to kind of future-proof things as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is intriguing. I do have some concerns about what that RFP is structured like and what components are in it, but
Yeah,
it's certainly worth continuing that
we will be
dialogue.
back to the board before we would go out with the RFP. So we would be, and we could actually come and discuss some of the options and then move forward again. If, you know, right now it's already the end of March, so May, June, I think we may be looking more towards that part of it, June. But
especially under the current circumstances.
it's with the current circumstances. But let's, yeah, we will be back with some discussions about where we think the RFP goes. I do think the partnership with the redevelopment agency in terms of working closely with them it is going to be beneficial to both of us, both of our agencies. So I do think we'll continue to do that. And when we come back, we'll also talk a little bit more about, you know, what we're looking at in terms of an RFP and what they are as well.
All right. Anything else?
And I would just mention, I'm going to come back to you guys at a subsequent board meeting to give you an overall update on the facilities, the overall facilities master plan for UTA. So
that'll be great.
I had one quick question, and I just didn't quite see what there was addressed. I didn't know the timeline if we just made the decision for doing retrofit of the existing headquarters. It doesn't sound like that's something that we ultimately would think would be beneficial, but I didn't know if there was a timeline on that as well. So just kind of put that out there. You don't need to address it today, but I just was curious if we could have all of that data when you do another presentation.
yeah, we can talk more. We'd have to go through a kind of a similar RFP process to get a contractor on board, and then depending, the biggest factor in kind of time to do the work would be if we moved people out of the building. We could do a lot faster than if we tried to do work while people are using the space. And so those would be the questions we'd have to work through. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of had thought about Meadowbrook as a good backup plan where we could
kind of maybe do a half at a time and move people to Meadowbrook and then move people back to kind of go through that process. But
Be pretty disruptive.
yeah, it would be disruptive as we're experiencing now as well. So.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that.
Good. Well, thank you. Why don't we take let's see, a short break, maybe to 10-2, let people take a break if they need to, and then we'll be back at 10 to 11 or 10:50. Wasn't supposed to criticize me. Okay. We welcome everybody back from our recess, and our next item up is a summary of some fair changes and planned public outreach. And I know that the current circumstances have challenged this process a little bit, but let's talk about how we're going forward. So, Monica, do you want to lead that, and Andrea?
I will, absolutely. Good morning. I'll speak really loud and hopefully you can hear me, Beth. As you will recall, last month I was here and I went over the draft fair policy with all of you. I committed to developing a summary of the fair changes, and I'm here to go over them with you today. I also committed during that meeting to creating a schedule and a timeline, which I will also discuss. First, I want to share an analogy of building a house with you. So standing on the street, when you look at a house, you see the roof, you see the walls, garage windows in their basic form. It looks really simple and straightforward. But when you pull up the floor plans, you can see or step inside the complexity that it takes, the plumbing, the electrical, the framing, and so on. You realize you underestimated the amount of time and detail that went into building it. Now, if you have ever imagined your dream home, you have a specific wish list, at least I do. You want a house built with your wants and your needs both in mind. So let's break this down. Before you start building a house, you need blueprints, and these are plans that define all the construction specifications, the dimensions, the materials, the layouts. Every house has standard key components and subcomponents. So for example, your bathroom has a toilet and tile and sink and a mirror. When we combine these elements, the end result is your oceanfront dream home with a wraparound porch. So not so stunning, our fair system actually works in a similar way. We have a fair policy that guides us in administering and operating the fair system. We have two key components that I've gone over several times with you. If you'll remember, they're pricing and payment. Within these two components, you can see all of the subcomponents. And by combining the two of these, the result is our fair system. And with the new draft policy in place, we have several guiding principles that we're trying to achieve. I won't go over all of them. You can see them here. Here at UTA, our fair system is already built. We are just renovating it to align with the guiding values. So consider this more of a renovation. Now I want to drill down into pricing. For every subcomponent of pricing and payment, I've created goals and objectives with your help that need to be accomplished if we want to successfully renovate like we would a house. We can't just focus on replacing the toilet in the bathroom and calling our renovation done. And we can't apply a beautiful coat of paint until we tear down the wallpaper. The tile on the floor can't be completed in the same amount of time it takes to install a new vanity mirror. Here are the guiding principles, or here are the subcomponents, and here are examples of goals and objectives within each one of those. So you can see it's complicated and it has several moving parts. This is just pricing. I don't have payment up here. I'm not going to go over these individually today, but I do want to drill down one more level for you and look at discounts. There's three main goals within discounts that we've called out right now. The first is to consolidate the current discount levels. The second is to create and administer robust discounts for the disadvantaged. And the third is to minimize the revenue loss for increased discounts. To give you an example, if we achieve these three goals, we get closer to a fair system that is simple and easy, equitable, and sustainable. Remember, accomplishing these three goals alone does not mean our renovation is complete. It is the combined effort of all of these initiatives that will give us a beautiful new renovated home. Now let's drill down one more level, the last level here, and look at what needs to be done to complete these objectives. Keeping, remember, our values of simple and equitable in mind, I'll focus right here on create and administer robust discounts for the disadvantaged. To do this, we would need to eliminate the current Horizon card discount, and once we eliminate that, we'll replace it with a new low-income discount that will expand the current Horizon discount. We'll design, which is number 2, design a 50% discount program. 3, increase the youth discount from 25 to 50%. And the last one, increase the low-income discount from 25 to 50%. So what I want to emphasize by showing you these slides is the fare system is complex and has many moving parts. And because of the complexity, summarizing all of these fare changes and the related timeline is not an easy task. I know I sit up here week after week trying to make it look like it's a walk in the park, but it's really not. It's actually difficult. It is clear where we are going now and where we are today. We have a direction and goals and objectives. The future fare policy has guiding principles that are directing our future strategy. Our timeline is based on 3 phases, if you'll remember that from my last presentation. I'd like to narrow in on some proposed changes for the first phase today. And our timeline that we had planned for is phase 1 would run through this fall, and those will be, obviously this timeline is subject to change based on the circumstances that we're experiencing now. So our draft fare policy bases all other rates as a ratio of the base fare. So what I'm recommending today are these multipliers. The day pass, I recommend to be 2 times the base rate. The monthly pass for both premium and regular passes, I'm recommending to be 34 times the base rate, and the premium rate priced at 2 times the base rate. And the premium rate applies to both ski and express bus. In phase 1, the front runner pricing is going to stay the same. I recommend changes to our discounts as well. This includes moving the Youth and Horizon card discounts from 25 to 50%, like I mentioned earlier. The Horizon card, the disabled senior citizens and Medicare card would remain at 50%. That's what they're at now. And then I also recommend that we streamline the fare pay discount, making it a flat 20% for all modes. I recommend shifts in our fare products and media. I want to emphasize how important this is if we want a fare system that is simple and easy. Because one reason that it is so complex right now is because we have too many options available, and many of them don't bring in enough revenue to justify the administrative work involved. So to give you an example, these are the ones we eliminate and replace. So the regular round trip we would replace with the day pass. The Park City 30-day pass we would replace with the Fare Pay card. I also recommend we eliminate the Flex Route 10 Pass Punch card. This would be a single cash purchase going forward. Tokens, this would be replaced by the Fare Pay card, and the Premium Upgrade would be replaced by the Premium Monthly Pass. And for example, Park City, the 30-day pass, we've sold between January and February 12 of those passes. So let me reiterate, the sales volume on several of these is extremely low, but please note that I'm sensitive to the fact that some of our riders will be inconvenienced as part of our renovation. I realize that no one wants their kitchen torn up for 2 months, and I know that learning to use a new high-tech dishwasher is not easy, but I am confident that long-term benefits will be better in the long run, and it will be worth the changes. So the next steps then, based on these 3 slides that I showed you, would be to complete a Title VI analysis. So we'll go ahead and start the Title VI analysis that's required for these Phase 1 changes. And then we'll also be required and would be doing some public outreach. And I'll have Andrea go over a few of those details right now.
Maybe, can I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely.
First of all, I anticipated you telling me that I was the sewer line because I only give crap, so.
No, I did not have that written down.
Okay.
Note taken.
Thank you, by the way. And I was thinking, because I had this conversation with a much younger friend, and we were talking about dishwashers, and had a long discussion about it. I just want to push the start button and let it hit the normal wash cycle, and I don't need a lot to feed into the thing. But as I look at your replacement options, it sort of gets you to that sort of simpler mode. It doesn't need to be super complicated for folks to have, viable options. And I was thinking even in our current challenge with paper transfer passes and those kind of things, and how you've been able to use those EFC things to just activate it for whatever period of time once they initially use it. And I'm wondering, is something like that viable down the road, for that day pass or something, so the person just waves it anytime during that day on the system?
Yes, we're definitely moving, and our goal with the new fare policy is to be able to shift to electronic cards and to utilize those more.
Okay.
And so we're definitely looking at, this is just phase one, but there will be more emphasis and effort placed on eliminating some of the paper passes like you mentioned and replacing them with the electronic cards.
Yeah, okay.
I do think too that, some of the streamlining of this allows marketing to focus on marketing, not a multiple level of different types of media, but to focus on the use of fair pay for different activities or the electronic, some other type of electronic media, whatever it would be. But right now, marketing has to focus on marketing all of these other medium that we have and all these different kind of pass programs that we have.
Maybe before we go to Andrea, just a sec, let me just ask Beth if you have any questions for Monica.
I don't have any questions at this time. I want to say that I really appreciated the remodeling / new home build analogies. They were great.
Thank you.
And Ken, are you good? Do you have any questions? Okay, Andrea, thank you for your patience, please.
Sure, and I hope you can hear me as well. No one's ever accused me of speaking quietly, so I'll do my best. As Monica said, in addition to doing a Title VI analysis, we would go forward with an official comment period per our requirements and guidelines. And we were prepared to move forward with that pretty quickly, but obviously with current conditions, with the coronavirus, doing a lot of public outreach and community meetings and open houses is not the right approach right now. So that is on hold for this time until we determine that it's socially appropriate to be out in the public. But I can give you a little bit of an overview of the plans we had put together. And I want to acknowledge Megan Waters, our community outreach manager, who has also been very involved in this process. And in addition to some of the typical standard things that we do during an outreach period, we're doing some very targeted things with community groups and some of the people Monica mentioned who may be specifically impacted, and helping to educate them about other options that are available. But when we do go forward, we typically have about a 30-day comment period, and with the typical public hearings, open houses for people to come and ask questions. And we also accept comment via the website and through email and phone and snail mail and all of those options. And so when the time is appropriate, we would post those required notices advising people of all the ways they can submit comment. Typically what we have done with FAIR, since it's a system-wide impact, not just a service change in one business unit, is we try to cover all of the counties and the areas in our service district so everybody has an opportunity to participate. So again, when that time is right, we will have open houses and hearings in all of the counties. Often we will do 2 of them in Salt Lake County. And so we will get those scheduled in addition to some of the targeted outreach. And I think, this is just kind of a summary of our activities. Again, the schedule is just on hold. So when the time is right and we get the green light, we will follow up with more information about those plans.
Any questions from the board for Andrea either? Okay. I can't see your face anymore, Beth, but I don't think we have any concerns about them going forward when the time is right. If you'd use your mic, okay. Just make sure.
Yeah,
No, I don't have
agree.
any concerns. I do understand exactly what they're saying. So I appreciate Andrea's report on this, and I acknowledge that that's a smart strategy. So thank you.
Okay. And Kent, you were saying something.
Oh, well, I just agree. I'm not adverse to going forward when the time is right.
We'll be ready.
All right, great.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thanks for your work on that.
Yes, you're welcome.
Appreciate the great illustration there. So
Can we just mention there will be, as part of this, there'll be a Title VI analysis, which they did mention, and that 30 days or whatever is really the time frame of when can we get that public outreach done. Until we know that, we won't be able to move on it.
But at some point, they'll start the Title VI process.
Yeah, and we'll let you know when we start the process through the agency report.
Okay.
Where how we're outreaching and those other activities. So
Yeah.
you're aware.
And the Title VI analysis is a lot of data analysis regarding the recent onboard survey. So some of that we can do right now in preparation for the public outreach, but we'll do what we can so that we're ready. And then anything else we need to put on hold, we'll put on hold. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think that brings us next to the 2019 Chief Performance Target Report, as well as the 2020 goals. And I don't know, Carolyn, is there, I know that you're probably having some of your staff come in.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but I can start on this one item, and then I think they're all supposed to practice social distancing far away from each other. Are you sitting down separately? Yeah. And then each coming in.
Okay.
Coming up to speak. Okay. Sorry.
You're good.
Mixed up my points.
And we appreciate your accommodations and patience through this process as we try to figure out a responsible way to do it as well. So
That's right.
looks like you're up first, Bob.
No, well, I'm up actually up
You're
first.
up first, Carolyn. Okay,
So can
great.
you, I think you have do you have
The clicker?
clicker? Sorry. Or can you? Either way. Oh, I was just going to let you keep it because I only have to do one slide. So, okay. So, all right. First, so I just want to say, today's meeting is to actually go over the 2019 goals by each of the chief officers that had been presented, I think a little before I came as well, and with their, in sort of the performance over 2019, and then go over the 2020 goals. I do want to talk a little bit about agency initiatives that are sort of more internal. And after working several months at UTA and working closely with our leadership team, I've identified key areas for focus for the agency and just as agency initiatives. One of those is the relaunch of the UTA Way. That's reinforcing and strengthening the culture at UTA through this relaunch. And a committee of the employees from the various areas throughout the agency have been working closely with UTA leadership to more specifically define the UTA Way and develop impactful ways to relaunch this initiative with our workforce. The senior leadership team has really taken this on, and I really appreciate all their work on this as well. The suicide prevention initiatives. As stewards of the community, we're always looking for ways that we can help the community customers and employees. Suicide prevention is an initiative that's not only important to UTA, but to our community as a whole. Our goal is to work with other community partners to reduce the number of suicides. Our suicide prevention initiatives will focus on 4 areas: specific awareness, which is awareness and training for our operators. We'll have a general awareness sort of component to it, which brings general awareness to our employees and to our customers. Could we have that ability to outreach to many people, which includes our customers? Capital improvements, and we're looking at ways that we can, what we can do in our rail corridors to prevent suicides. And we're actually I think in the next board meeting, we'll be coming with a grant that we're putting in for some technologies that might assist us in that. And then the incident and stress management, that's really around our operators and other employees who have to deal with more closely in touch with these suicides, and we're strengthening our programs to provide the support that they need that are involved in a suicide incident. And the third area, I'm not sure if it's facility evaluation, training programs, it's really looking at our training facilities, doing an evaluation of them as well as our programs. It's an important part of our operations, and we're looking to see how we can improve the training environment and all the programs for our employees. I think right now in these times, we're looking at how we can maybe get some training done, as the operators may not be full-time if we have some of these service modifications. So that'll be some of the things we'll be taking a look at. And then, and this is something that all the executive team is engaged in as well on all of these initiatives. So I want to go over a little bit on the 2019 goals. And I think the first up is Bob.
Had several goals for 2019. These are the ones that interacted with the board. So the first, and you've been very well acquainted with this one, is establishing a board fair policy. And so the board policy was adopted 4.1 on July 31st. And since then, you've had more and more discussions about what that looks like, what the house should look like when it's built. And those discussions will continue as we go into this year. The second one had to do with the joint agency inventory contracts. We've been able to do the bus one, and recently we expanded that. Remember, we went from 100 parts and added almost 700 parts. I talked with Todd right before the meeting, and he's expecting the rail one to be before you in April. That the negotiations have been completed, and we think we've got an agreement ready to bring forward.
Now, is that the same group of agencies, or is it a slightly different group because not all of them have rail and bus?
It's a different agency.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, specific to rail. And then the third one was updating the budget process in 2020 for our operating and capital budgets, as well as budget amendments. We did 6 budget amendments last year, and we incorporated several touch points for the board and for the local advisory council as we did the 2020 budget work, as well as the 2019 budget amendments.
Any questions for Bob? Thank you, Bob.
No questions. Thanks, Bob.
So this is the Chief Operating Officer 2019 goals. Our first goal there was to meet or exceed all Chief Operating Officer key performance indicators, and so I'll show that on the next slide because we have a dashboard that I can kind of show you our stats there, and we can dig into those if you would like. Number 2 was successfully implement new service. This is really centered around our Salt Lake City service that we launched in August of 2019. Well aware, we increased annual bus hours by 59,950.
Eddie, can you speak up a bit?
Yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. Implemented the new Salt Lake City service in August of 2019. That increased annual bus hours by 59,590 and the miles by a little over 503,000. That was no small undertaking because we increased our staff by 37 operators. And so it's a huge help from the people office to be able to get those folks in. We also increased by 2 operations supervisors, 3 mechanics. And during this whole process, and this was really the win that really helped us make sure that we were able to meet those demands, is that we reduced new hire turnover by 3.2% versus the previous year. And in addition to that, we sourced 10 new buses to enable that expansion. Goal number 3 was meet the operating budget. We completed the year 1.2% under budget, and if you exclude fuel, and that's not a typo, 0.06% under budget. That's not very much, but I'm actually really proud of that, and we'll be able to dig into the budget a little bit more. You kind of see the numbers and what the drivers of that are. But that was a big initiative of my office of all of operations, was to really get our budget in line, making sure that we requested exactly what we needed and not a penny more. And I think we come pretty close to that. Some of it's a little too tight for, too close for comfort. And you've heard me voice some of my concerns about that in the past, but that's about as close as you can get without going over. The next one, develop a 5-year capital and state a good repair plan. We did develop that plan. On the capital side, obviously, when these goals were written, I was over capital at the time. It was before we kind of reorganized and moved that group over. So, but, you know, obviously I worked with Mary through that process early on. And then again, you know, capital and state of good repair kind of go hand in hand. And so we worked on that one together. But, you know, looking just at the state of good repair side, it's huge. It's the same, you know, the same impact that we have on the capital side. But the ability to look out over 5 years, you know, it's not all the time that you have a project that's just 1 year, but the way we did things in the past, you had to try to get all that budget before you started. And so being able to look out over 5 years really gives us that planning opportunity. So I see this as a big win of getting that done, and it's something we can continue to maintain as time goes on. And then the last one that's up there, implement initiatives that support a strong organizational culture focused on employee development and retention. One of the things we did, obviously there's multiple things and there's a lot of little things that go on behind the scenes when you're thinking about culture work, but one of the things was we restructured the Salt Lake Service Unit operations management. As we started to look at some of the challenges we were having, you know, Salt Lake is organized the same as other bus garages, but just by the sheer size, they're just different. And so having one manager that's trying to run the day-to-day, plus deal with training and deal with, you know, employee relations type issues and things like that, obviously it's a tremendous amount when you have, you know, 24 supervisors, 25 supervisors, over 500 operators. I mean, it's just a big deal. So what we did there is we restructured just a little bit, and now we have a manager that's over training and employee relation type activities. And then we have a additional manager that's over just the day-to-day operation. And so we've really seen some benefits from that. Just kind of splits up that workload a little bit and helps us navigate some of the issues a little bit better. One thing I've done with the labor office, I meet with Rich Murray every 2 weeks. I don't know that that's the right word, of receive status of discipline report, but really it's just to keep me aware of what issues are going on. You know, what's going on in all the business units, you know, what's going on with the labor side of things. And then it kind of gives me direction as to what I need to engage in and what I just need to hold off and wait to, you know, let the system work itself out. Next week, continued development of front runner tracks and MOW maintenance training program. That's something that is really at the forefront for me in 2020 to get that program up. And then finally, we conducted a talent assessment of all assistant managers in the operations group. Again, very helpful, a lot of help from the people office on that one. But it was really nice to kind of look at each individual person, looking at their capabilities, their performance, and classifying them and really developing our bench, right? Identifying who those strong performers are that we really need to be investing in as they continue to look at moving up and filling those positions at higher levels. So it's been helpful for us. Any questions on these before we go through the KPI slides? Okay. So this is our KPI list. As you'll see, there is some red on this list. I see red as the color of opportunity. Obviously, there's some room for improvement in those areas. And, you know, a lot of times for me personally, if I see a scoreboard that's all green, I think that you probably didn't stretch yourself very hard. And I think we did set realistic goals. So expense, I already talked about that a little bit, 1.2%. And then right below that, you start to kind of see the drivers. Platform hours, we were just a little bit less than 1% over budget on that. Miles, same thing, 0.9, 0.6. And, you know, to me, it's kind of amazing that you can look, our planners are good enough to look at something of that big of a number of 29,150,428 miles and be able to look at that in a year in advance and get that close to exactly what's going to happen. And so what we did that was different in our budgets is in the past, a lot of times we would add some miles and hours in there to kind of compensate for bus bridges and, you know, just extra things that we had to do. And we cut a lot of that out as we went to try to right size the budget. Maybe we went a little far. Maybe, you know, we should have added another 1% or so into our miles and hours. And so I think we've made that adjustment for 2020. So I think we'll improve in that area. Cost per hour is just a little bit over, 1.9% over on cost per hour. Again, that's mostly driven by overtime. There was a lot of things that we had, whether it was just special activities of things going on, or we had a lot of SGR projects. There was a ton of training that went on in Salt Lake as we geared up for the Salt Lake City service, right? And so as we pull trainers out of the seat, we have to put somebody in there. Cost per mile, we did pretty good. A lot of that's driven by fuel prices, which is always a big help, and that helps us make our budget. Subsidy per rider, we did okay, 4.4% over. On-time performance, we beat that by 0.7%, and our average weekday boardings were about 0.4% under our goal. Now, if you remember, our ridership was up in 2019 overall. What this number tells you is that I'm tracking weekday ridership, so our bump in ridership came from weekend service. So it was that increased ridership probably on Saturdays that gave us that little bit of bump. Service quality, we did very well in this area. This is bus miles per voice of customer road call and rail miles per service interruption. Did really, really well on those, so we'll continue to stretch those goals out. To put this into perspective, when I got here in 2011, the goal was 10,000 miles. And so there's been a tremendous amount of improvement in this area over the years.
Eddie, has that come from newer vehicles or just better preventative maintenance?
I think it's a combination of both. The bus fleet, obviously we had a poor fleet, a particular fleet. It was our 2001 buses that really caused us a lot of challenges, especially in the Salt Lake City area. So as we got rid of that fleet, that obviously helped. Buses are in pretty good shape. But this really is a testament to our maintenance employees and our managers who are analyzing, really looking at the fleets and doing really good preventative maintenance. And then finally, our safety and security, bus avoidable accidents, we had less than one. We had come in at 0.84 accidents per 100,000 miles. Our fare inspection rate, we did miss that number just a little bit. We come in at 9.4 instead of 10%. And that was mostly due to a shortage of officers. We lost several officers throughout the year as other agencies.
Eddie, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're over there. Good Lord. It's terrified me.
Sorry.
She can be that way occasionally.
Jeez.
Sorry, we just got word that the audio cut out on the streaming. Eric, I'm
still hearing it here. I'm listening to it right now.
Okay.
God, my heart rate's up. This has scared me.
I think we're okay.
We're okay to go?
Sorry to scare you.
Thanks for the interruption. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And so really, I think I was talking about fair inspection rate, and that just really comes down to, we lost some officers as other agencies geared up. And then asset management, this is really a stretch goal here. Obviously, we have to have 100% of our inspections done, but the way this particular goal is calculated is we have it on a 28-day cycle. So if we can have 95% done in the 28 days, then obviously we're not doing all that last minute inspections on the last couple of days of the month. And so that's really what that's focused on. And we're just going to continue. We're going to keep that goal and continue to focus on it.
I had a question, Eddie.
Sir.
I noticed that the actual expenses were $3 million less than the budget, and yet the next three items that you would think would contribute to the total expenses, you're all higher.
It's all fuel
in the budget.
It's all fuel.
Is that just all the fuel?
It's fuel.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference then.
That's the difference.
Okay.
And that's the reason I showed the way I did, the 1.2% to the good. But then if you take out fuel savings,
it's 0.06.
0.06.
So it's right on the money
right on the money
for without the fuel.
Right. And so had fuel been $2.50 a gallon, we'd have been over budget.
All right.
Right.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Any questions, Beth?
No questions at this time. Kent actually asked the same question I was thinking of, so thanks. This is really helpful. helpful. And especially the explanation on the 28 days, that was really helpful. So thank you, Eddie.
And I would just compliment you for not being timid about red and looking at that. First of all, your percentages in the red are nothing to be ashamed over. They're better than my health goals with my doctor. So, but I think to myself, the fact that you're willing to challenge yourself and kind of strive to get to there is really commendable. So thanks for being upfront and open about that.
Thank you.
Let's see, I'm not sure who's up next. And
Hello. So as you all know, the Service Development Office is a new office this year. So the goals that were developed in, I guess it started last year, but at the beginning of 2019, the different departments were in 3 different
And by the way,
offices.
congratulations on formally taking your position. I don't think we've formally have acknowledged that, but
Thank you very
well
much.
chosen and congratulations, by
Well,
the way.
thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, the memo will go out today to everybody else.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's good. I was going to say something anyway, so.
So for the, there's 3 departments. The capital department was under the operating office. The real estate and TOD was under finance, and then planning was under the planning office. So the first 2 goals are related to the capital department. The first goal was to develop a 5-year capital plan with associated funding strategies, and we did that in September. We presented the draft plan to the board and the advisory council, and it was adopted in October of 2019. We are right now starting the next 5-year plan, so we're working on that. The second goal is also a capital goal, is to ensure design and construction quality for all of UTA projects. All of our design projects go through a design review with our internal and external stakeholders to make sure all project requirements are met, and that also it goes through a quality control check by the design team. Then all construction projects are overseen by a UTA project manager. In addition to the project manager, we have construction inspectors that are assigned to observe, inspect, and test all aspects of construction. And then once a project is ready to go into active operations, we have a rigorous testing and activation process before being approved as revenue ready. And then any existing components that are modified or rebuilt are also inspected and tested before being approved. The next 2 goals are from our real estate and TOD department. The first goal is to utilize TOD system analysis tool, and that tool was completed. Paul Drake's team did a great job on completing that tool in February, and then that was used to help the board select 3 TOD sites in March, and they selected the Salt Lake Central North Temple site, which we talked about earlier today, the Ogden Central Station, and the Clearfield Station. The next goal with the TOD department was to progress TODs through RFP and groundbreaking. UTA issued an RFP to select a development partner for the Clearfield Station TOD. We worked with the Clearfield team to select the team, and work is now progressing toward a master development plan agreement for that site. Projects in Ogden and Salt Lake City are also moving forward with RFPs expected in mid-2020. And then we also had groundbreaking on 2 phases of the development at the Jordan Valley TOD, including a retail parcel and a second phase of apartments. The last goal is for the planning department, and that was to complete the service choices study, then implement that into a 5-year mobility plan. The service choices survey was completed, but this timeline has been extended significantly, and this is largely due to the many conversations we've had internally with the business units, the executive team, the executive director, and the board to incorporate your feedback into that plan. We expect to,
Mary, sorry, can you speak up a bit?
oh, sorry. We expect to go out to the public with that in the June timeframe. And then once that's adopted, we will, once the network plan is adopted, that will be incorporated into the 5-year mobility plan. And that's all I had.
Questions from the board for Mary? Okay, I think you're off the hook. Thanks, Mary. Why don't we, unless she's close by, why don't we just continue on with the report, and then she can join us. Unless you need a second. She probably has to initiate the reconnection, doesn't she? Okay. What's that? We still have a
I think
quorum.
you still have a quorum and can continue, and we can try to put her on a cell phone near you. How about that?
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for your patience.
No, that's okay. We're working through it all, aren't we?
Yeah.
So thank you for this time. So Communications and Marketing Office 2019 goals. Trustee Holbrook is very familiar with this first goal. So 2019 was a year of beginnings for my office. Several initiatives was the start. We also were a little reorganized. So like I said, a lot of these goals are beginning, and we initiated really concentrating on a strategic framework that built on building the public trust and really dialing in ridership for communications, PR and marketing, community relations, and my team with innovative mobility and customer experience. So looking at the first goal, it was making UTA more relatable. And if you remember, we launched a new people-focused brand campaign that was really successful in the community. People liked that we did our television ad. But one of the other things that we did that was a little more subtle is you saw all of our programs and initiatives. Some of the collateral that we initiated had a lot of people focus. So you saw pictures, some of the things we talked about a lot of our people focused programs. And so even initiatives such as our VIA campaign, you saw people at the forefront. So that's really what we were moving towards, and it's been successful. One of the things you'll see as a measurement is on our benchmark survey results, and that will be coming to you on April 8th, I believe, and we'll be getting those results to you to see kind of how the measurement of our public trust and our public opinion reacts to that. So I'll just wait to reestablish.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. So that's the alignment on making UTA more relatable. Hi, Trustee Holbrook. Can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. Okay. I'm moving on to my second goal, which is better communications with external, with our external customers. And really, we did a lot of new initiatives with the new trip planner. If you saw transit, and that's been really successful for us on this, especially where we are today. They've been a great partner in helping us kind of communicate with a lot of people digitally, letting them know how we've done new service adjustments. If you go on there right now on the app, it says it has a COVID-19 announcement. That has been a great launch for us. We've also redesigned our bus headers, and then I think Sam and Megan, you've met, but we relaunched our K through 12 program as well. We haven't done the measurement on our community outreach, and we also need to, in 2020, really do a strategic plan around community relations So that'll be coming up next. One of the things I want to talk about external communications that we've seen and want to commend my team on is really looking at consistency and alignment. We'll be really dialing that in 2020, but even working with the teams here, with the RGMs, working with the board, working with our executive director, making sure our messaging is really aligned and that we stay on the same trajectory with our tone and our focus. So that's what we'll be working on in 2020, but it even goes down to those bus headers, making sure that we are consistent and aligned. So those are some of the things that we did in 2019, but we're going to continue that alignment. So I challenge you when you're out there to see how those bus headers look, making sure that they are consistent. So better customer communications internally. Again, this was a start for us, working with the Chief People Office, and Kim and Lindsay was a new hire for us. This was based on feedback when we did an assessment with the agency and assessment external. What we heard internally was from our operators, from our staff, we don't know what's going on. We hear it from the paper. So in 2019, working with our Chief People Office, how can we better communicate with our staff? We initiated the Talking Transit. We revamped that. We did a comprehensive assessment of how we can communicate with our operators, with the staff. Lindsay's been working with Carolyn to develop a plan of that internal communications coming out from the executive director's office, working with the Chief People Office of how to communicate what's going on internally. And I think we've done a great job of balancing communications and HR office of that. I can tell you right now, all of us are leaning on Lindsay for the COVID-19 communications. She's done an amazing job in balancing between HR's needs and our external needs. So this was a big lift for us, and we'll be doing more. But again, it's a start. We'll assess with our engagement survey. That's a measurement for us to see how we're doing and what improvements we can make over the next year to continue that internal communications piece. We'll also be finalizing the writing style guide and glossary. This was something Trustee Holbrook talked about, again, being consistent in our wording, consistent in our messaging, and consistent in how we write Frontrunner, how we write tracks. And believe me, I've made that mistake once or twice myself. So Andrea's been on me. So those are things that we'll be looking at. Meet the transit needs of current and future generations. Again, this is really thinking that ridership dial. How do we bring on more riders? How do we make sure we're promoting and marketing those items? And of course, we're all familiar with UTA On Demand and our microtransit and our pilot. I want to tell you that on March 11th, we hit our highest ridership day of 505 people, and then COVID-19. So we know the pilot was successful for right-sizing the community needs, but we are going to continue to assess it. What we're seeing is it's, of course, the ridership is going down. It's in aligned with where it was. It's about 100 people per day right now was the last numbers I saw. Still getting ridership. People are still going to probably the grocery store. We know that was one of their places of going. But again, we'll look at it, look at the ridership as well. Again, planning for transit signal priority. This is about how we have connected vehicles, and that's one of the things. Again, what are our future needs as a transit, and how we look at that for the future. Those are assessments we're doing in that area. Putting the customer at the core of everything. This is the customer experience team. This is one of their main goals. Bus stops are core. They're the doorstop to how we get on and off, just like our rail stations. Really implementing the wayfinding program in our bus stop master plan, and we're looking at 100 bus stops per year starting in 2020. We thought we were going to get it, but we just heard that one of our contractors is cutting back, but some of the construction is still moving forward. So we think in 2020 we'll still be able to hit some of those goals, but it depends on where we're going to see some of the businesses and how they're moving forward through this. So is there any questions that you have for me?
Let me go to any questions from the board. Okay. I think we're there. Thank you. And thanks again for putting up with some technical challenges there. I think that she's back online. Okay. Kim, welcome.
Thank you. I'll try to talk right into this. Okay. Do I have that? All right, so I'll just go over our 2019 goals.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to just comment on. Oh, can't hear me. Okay.
Now we can.
I will not comment.
Oh, I guess it broke up on you. Are you still there? Okay. Why don't you go ahead, Kim? Thanks.
Sure, no problem. Okay, so our first goal that we had talked with you all about last year in 2019 was that we had hoped to successfully negotiate terms of our new collective bargaining agreement. As you are aware, that's ongoing. We also had a goal to support, our operations by ensuring that all the hiring and training efforts accomplished what we needed for our current and then the added service for Salt Lake City. As Eddie mentioned, it was no small task, and we worked very closely with the Salt Lake Business Unit to ensure that we could meet that hiring goal. We implemented some new targeted recruitment efforts. We redesigned some of our training so that we could increase our graduation rate, and we were doing that all at the same time that we were putting people through. So we had a lot of people, our trainers, our operator trainers, we have bus operators who help with that training, just really coming together to evaluate how things were working and make changes week by week. And so it was a huge effort, and I appreciate all the employees that were involved in that, and we were able to make pullout for that August service. Another one of our major goals that is continuing into 2020 is to focus on leadership development. We did some amazing kickoff work in 2019 with our Pathways 1, our Emerging Leaders program. We got 81 employees through that program last year. And we also designed Pathways 2 that rolled out just this year. And at the time, and we rolled that out in January of 2020. As Eddie mentioned, we did work closely with him to do a leadership talent assessment of his area, and that is in preparation for the work we're going to do this year on succession planning. And so that's really going to set us up to better understand our needs as we move forward with leadership. We did a lot of work around employee engagement and in improving our survey process for employee engagement and also our follow-up on our results for that. We did increase participation over 2018 by almost 11%. It's a difficult task to get our workforce to take surveys sometimes because it's so dispersed. And so by just seeing that amount of improvement, we were really happy about that. We also worked with individual department leaders to create leader-led workshops that they went out and talked to their employees in groups about what we saw on the results there. And we completed the pulse check on the top 4 categories that I didn't include on the slide, and I'm not sure I have in front of me, and I apologize, but they were mostly focused around the connection to our work. So how well connected are we to the UTA way? How well connected are we to our customer? How well connected are we to the rest of the organization? And what we saw, want to improve on in those areas is that people better understand the whole work of the agency and feel connected to our rider. And then our last one that we reported on was that we did roll out our new clinic last year, opened a new clinic at the very end of 2017 and into 2018. 2018 and into 2019. And we implemented a redesigned wellness program. We saw an improvement in participation in our bargaining unit employees from about 48% to 52%. We'd still like to see that go up, but it was a good improvement. Our admin held at about 84%. We worked on creating our UTA employee risk metric. I don't have that in front of me right now, but what we do did see is that we have about 50% of our workforce that is participating in our wellness program, showing as low risk, meaning we're healthy, we're maintaining our health, we're participating. We had about 45% in a medium risk category. And so that's a category, that's positive news in that it's less work to get, yourself into a low risk, and only about 5% of participating employees were in the high risk. So we have two goals for this year that we're working on with that data. One is to get more participation so we can better understand, are we not seeing the folks in the higher risk categories participate? Because that's something we just don't know. And then, of course, helping folks move from those high and medium into in a category lower. And of course, our goal there is to keep our healthcare costs down, but also to improve the quality of life for our employees, and that helps with customer service and increased productivity.
Kim, what on the bargaining unit participation percentage? Is there some thoughts of why that's so low? I'm kind of surprised, actually.
It is lower than we'd liked it. It's inched up over the years. I think there's a couple of challenges that we have there. We are working closely with the union to really try to find better ways to motivate people to move into that program. We have a smaller differential between our PACE healthcare cost versus our non-PACE in the bargaining unit.
Okay.
And then we are looking at availability. It's easier for our office staff to access our clinics and whatnot. And so we're looking on how do we make it easier for our bargaining unit employees to participate.
Sure.
And we had a lot of conversations with our ATU counterparts during our joint insurance committee meetings this year about really diving into the data behind this and how we can get more participation.
Other questions from the board for Kim? Great.
Thank you.
Great.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, please go ahead, Beth.
Thanks. I wanted to understand a little bit more about the emerging leaders. Do we feel like that we had a good graduating 81 employees is great? What goals do we have moving that forward, if any, at this stage?
We're continuing to offer both our Pathways 1 and our Pathways 2 now. So our Pathways 1 was for folks who hadn't had any formal leadership background, and then our Pathways 2 was for folks that had a little bit of exposure there. And I can tell you that at a month ago when I put these numbers together, we had seen about 15 of those 81 folks who had gone through emerging leaders receive promotions throughout the organization. And so we plan to continue offering 1 and 2, and we're in the development of 3, and that'll be more tied to our succession planning efforts when we better understand what our needs are of already titled leaders. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. And that's great. Hearing that 15, did receive promotions of some kind is fantastic. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kim, for that report. And thanks, and for your staff's work as well. So appreciate that. Let's see. I think that covers them all?
That covers each of them. So I'm just going to quickly go through the 2020 goals and initiatives.
Sounds great.
So, thanks for changing that.
Before you move ahead into 2020, I'd just like to make the comment that it's very refreshing to see some pretty challenging goals put out there by each of those units for 2019, and largely achieve the goals that they were after. And they were some pretty challenging goals.
Yeah.
So I think we've got a wonderful team, and I think they're to be complimented on the tremendous effort in all kinds of things, from operations to people to communications, everything. And all the planning that's going on around here. I think we've got some marvelous people that we're working with.
I agree.
And I hope that the 2020 begin to really stretch them even further.
Well, we're getting stretched right now.
Yes, we are.
So
I wanted to, before you started, Carolyn, I wanted to just make a quick comment back to communications because I wasn't able to comment. That's when I kind of got disconnected from the audio. And I just wanted to thank them for being adaptable and willing to kind of like relook at their whole structure in terms of how to best communicate moving forward. I feel like it's such an important piece, and I really wanted to thank them for all of their efforts.
That somebody's going to tell you thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Holbrook. That means a lot to my team, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to the 2020 goals initiatives. Now, the one things that we had done this year, and if you notice as each of them talked, oftentimes they couldn't do it alone, even though Eddie might come up and talk about it, he needed to look at it. So we really structured the 2020 goals initiatives around what we as a team or as an organization need to do, and we focused it on the three areas that we have: service, people, and stewardship. So I'm going to go quickly through these because you've listened to a lot so far, and understand we did these about 6 weeks ago. So there's things that we're going to be doing that based on what's going on with our service now that might be changing a little bit of that, but we'll go through these. We're going to the two things is that most people do rely on UTA to get them to where they need to go, and we strive to provide safe, efficient, and effective service to the community. So in 2020, our focus will be to enhance and improve customer service as well as improve system performance. Under service and improved customer experience, we are looking at, as Mary mentioned, completing that service choices study and recommending a 5-year mobility plan. You've all been involved in the service choices study. We've had a number of workshops and they're moving on that as well. I think the planning staff is quite busy right now on just immediate needs that we have. We are going to complete the South Salt Lake Microtransit pilot project. We do have a little blip right now, as Nicole mentioned, with ridership down, but we have seen it as very viable, and we are continuing to explore other areas of viability and potentially put that into some of the service choices work as well, which really wasn't on the radar at the time we started the service choices work. We're going to successfully implement enhanced bus service in Salt Lake County. Whether that will be August or whatever, we'll be taking a look at that. We're not as sure how that's going to be going on with the time frame that we have right now. But we do still have the desire to continue to move on the improvements that we can on the bus stop improvements and implementing the digital signage pilot project at the selected bus hub locations. Improving system performance is really trying to continue to provide efficient and effective, safe service in regards to ridership cost reliability. You'll still probably see Eddie's KPI matrix when we're doing our budgets and where we're at and at the end of the year. We'll continue to improve maintenance practices to minimize service interruptions. Even though last year really Eddie did, as much as it might have been a little % off or whatever, we have really accomplished our goals in terms of what we've been wanting to do. Now we'll have to see if Eddie stretches those goals, and we'll see how his team does this year. But I think it is really working with everybody in trying to improve those practices, which has everything to do from the operations staff to supply management to the availability of how we keep our workforce engaged. Ensuring a safe and secure system with emphasis on avoidable accidents is continuing as well. And then we are continuing to look at securing funding for fixed guideway improvements in the studies. We were pretty, as Shul mentioned, we did get some funding this year from the state on some of these activities, and our big effort will still be to try to move forward Ogden, Weber State BRT into construction. But we actually have now a good study effort that will be going on with Front Runner, as well as continued work into the Pointed Mountain and potentially moving that into environmental as well. And we'll continue to look at other studies as we move forward. On the people side, the people are the core of what we do. In 2020, we'll work to increase employee engagement and support workforce development.
Is there another slide?
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to go to the next slide. Sorry.
Here we go. Sorry.
So our goal is to always provide consistent and clear and reliable communications to our riders, our employees, and our community. Right now, that is absolutely critical in what we are doing with COVID-19. It is true, Lindsay's done a great job, Andrea, Nicole, the whole team on doing that as well. We will conduct a leadership talent calibration assessment to create the phase 1 succession plan throughout. That's the focus of the people office, and redesign talent management strategy to support UTA's desired culture. We're continuing to do that work as well. We are looking at the UTA's performance management system to provide effective development of UTA employees. The one thing we're also looking at is talking to Kim, we're actually looking at trying to see how we do our performance evaluations in general and maybe improving that technology-wise into what we do now. I don't think Kent has to do that, but Carlton has to get in there and put his, it can be cumbersome, trying to take a look at that as well. And then we'll continue to roll out the UTA way. And the consistent, clear, and reliable communications, that's really, we're looking at updating the strategic communications framework. That hasn't been updated for a couple years. We are working also with Trustee Holbrook on that as well, and she's been giving us some, her input, which would be great. Developing a community engagement strategy to go forward. Just to let you know, right now, since we don't have the UTA happenings and a lot of community engagement, they're working as most of the team is working really on the day-to-day activities we're dealing with COVID-19 and how we're communicating. They're working on how do we sort of provide like an onboarding of our riders once we start getting out of this sort of the pandemic concerns that we have, and how do we rebuild ridership back up. So Nicole's team is doing that other focus on that as well, and how are we going to do an onboarding strategy for new riders, and what are we going to do there, because it's something that we didn't plan for, but we will need to do. The other thing we learned from the big snowstorm that we had a couple months ago was developing a snow-go team to minimize service delays and improve customer communication during inclement weather. I know we have a question mark there. That question mark probably shouldn't be there. We are going to do that. But
wondering if you'll have inclement weather.
This is when we tell Trustee Millington what station to show up with a shovel, and we will be moving forward. And actually, as part of that, we will be looking at some state of good repair issues for that as well. But really, to get some more communications, I think that was part of it that we heard throughout, is people just didn't know when they were stranded, and they didn't know when the trains were coming or what was happening with the services. Even though we were really great at getting it out there on social media, what we could, we just got overloaded. There were so many changes so quickly. And then update the continuity of operations plan, which is currently being done. Actually, it's been a big effort in terms of implementing the EOC, activating the EOC twice already this year. And moving forward, that'll be a big part of our work that we'll continue to look at. The stewardship area, which is the next slide, is, to keeping our system in working order and effectively managing our budget is an important part of our operation. And in 2020, we will ensure our system's in a state of good repair while also maintaining fiscal responsibility. I know it looks short on the maintain a state of good repair, but we are doing many, many things in this area. We are developing the 10-year facility plan and incorporating all the things that we see in the next 5 years in the 2021 to 2025 capital plan. Hal Johnson talked about that today. He's been working with all the RGMs, working with various people throughout the agency, meeting with the executive team to take a look at what should that facility master plan be at each of our areas, each of our sites that we own, and then how do we potentially plan for expansion, and then or in general try to improve the efficiency of our operations. So you should see that probably at one of your April board meetings. We'll be coming back with that information as well. So that leads us into the 2021-2025 capital plan. That will be an update of the 5-year plan that was done last year. And then continue to develop the comprehensive asset management program. This is a big effort in the agency right now. Eddie, Bob, and Mary have shown great leadership in this area and pulling this together. So we'll have to do a presentation coming back to the board on what has been done. And Troy's been leading a lot of this, so the comptroller, and so we'll be coming back to provide you more information on that. But we've met all the guidelines, all the requirements that are met for the federal mandates. That's all been met. So we're moving forward on that. Maintaining fiscal responsibility is really key. Continue to budget to effectively manage the 2020 budget. This is going to be sort of, we don't know right now, how sales tax revenues are going to be impacted. We have a sense of how the fare revenues are being impacted. But we're really going to be seeing the federal stimulus package, which Shul mentioned today. We should be looking at a substantial portion of money coming to UTA to support, lost revenues, some of the activities that we're doing currently, lost fares, those types of things that we'll be continuing to look at. But how we do that and how we use those funds will be critical. We will be coming back to the board on that as well, but this is something that wasn't planned for. But I think we'll absolutely make it through this time frame with the fiscal sort of responsibility that this board and other boards have previously had here. I think we're in good shape. We will be also coming up and talking to you about the reserve policy. So this is a little test on our reserve policy as well. So we'll be back to the board on that as well with Bob. As you look to today, we are really looking at adopting a fare policy, implementing the phase 1 fare review. That how we do this and how we do it in combination with bringing on more service or bringing up service, this is going to now have to be a dance. We're going to have figure out what the dance is going to be and how we're continuing to ramp up again for more service. If we end up, which most likely we'll have some service reductions during this time frame, how do we ramp that back up? How do we bring on these new fare policies? What's the timing? You don't want to overload, but some things might have some synergies. We'd want to implement them together. That'll be something that we're all talking about right now. So that'll be something we'll continue to talk to you about. As we mentioned, we're doing an increased use of strategic part sourcing. A lot of that's on the inventory side, inventory management. Continue to deliver capital projects on time and on budget. We're continuing to move on that, though I know we owe you a presentation on Depot District once we know what the cost estimates are, and we'll be back on that as well. And then developing the 2021 budget with projections that maintain fiscal responsibility. And part of that will be taking a look at our reserves as well. So those are the areas that we would be covering in the 2020 goals and initiatives. If you see or have any other comments or thoughts or things you want us to add, please let us know.
Well, Carolyn, first of all, I would say those are, especially in light of current circumstances, those are not passive goals, but I think well structured. I joined a conference thing yesterday on the governor and the Salt Lake Chamber had on economic recovery, and they laid out a time frame, I think some of which was on the news last night, that sort of put the health crisis phase to 8 to 12 weeks, and which is probably longer than most of us thought when we started this process a few weeks ago, but certainly probably puts us realistically to the end of May and maybe a little bit into June. But it also talks about how they're hoping or foreseeing coming out of that, and the state fortunately is well positioned with a lot of reserves, and we're not without some, and it's a two-edged sword in being fiscally cautious and but be looking for opportunities where there's a competitive bidding environment. When people are cautionary, they often stop projects, and it kind of takes the pressure off of some of the pricing and things. And so I hope that we look at projects kind of strategically as we go forward, because there may be some synergies of taking advantage of this economic sort of slowdown, if you will, not only contributing to the economy, but sort of moving some of these projects ahead in a way that, and that we know we're going to need regardless. And so I'm sure everybody's looking at that and trying to get a sense of that, but I hope we don't sort of totally shut down.
No, and I don't think, I think for most of the team, even though a lot of our focus right now is on dealing with this pandemic, is continuing to do work. I do agree with you, and oftentimes infrastructure in the public sector is a big push in terms of economic recovery, and it does get us back, and that's what carries us through. And oftentimes it is big transportation agencies and that do help put that through, get the first projects out the door and start moving on the economy again.
Okay, well, that's great. Other questions though from the board to Carolyn on these 2020 goals?
No, I don't have any right now.
I don't have any either. I just wanted to echo what Carlton said. That was well said, and I appreciate all that everyone is doing.
And I would also compliment you on, I know these are sort of shared goals amongst all your team, and I think that's exciting as they, find strategies to accomplish them together. That'll be important. So thank you.
Thank you.
I think that brings me to other business, which is a meeting, a formal meeting on April the 8th, but we will be scheduling a meeting soon. I don't know if it's been posted yet, but we're anticipating a meeting on March 27th.
I think it's Friday at 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock, yeah.
Yeah, Friday morning at 9 o'clock is it next.
With that, I will entertain a motion for closed session for a strategy session to discuss collective bargaining, and that will be held in this room, and so those not involved will invite them to exit at that point, but I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
I move we go into closed session.
Second.
I have a motion by Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion passes, and so we'll give a second for people to leave here in a second. Okay, we've returned from our closed session, and it brings us to item number 12, which is adjournment. I'll entertain a motion to that end.
So moved.
I've got a motion from Kent, seconded by Beth. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, person's job in accomplishing this. Thanks, everybody. Yeah.